Recording in progress.
Before I get started, though, I wanted to share my my gratitude to Director Felt, my other fellow Greg on the board, of course, with much more experience. But it has truly been a pleasure working with you. Honestly, it's hard to come into this and start to get comfortable and really get to know folks, and then to see you step off. And it's obviously the nature of kind of how this board works. But it's truly been a pleasure. As was noted yesterday. That March 2020 meeting, again, I was actually on the other side then. I remember that very well. We'll never forget just the poise and the thoughtfulness that you brought, specifically in that moment, and then of course moving forward. And I just think that's what has exemplified you as a leader is that thoughtfulness, that kindness. Being able to tell it like it is, but in a very gracious way. I really respect your leadership style. So it's been a pleasure working with you, and yeah, we'll welcome the next person and look forward to working with you down the road. But really appreciate that, and the volunteerism bug that you clearly have had. I mean, it's deeply appreciated. So just wanted to pass that along. So just a few quick things on the roundtable front. The Metro Basin Roundtable, and we've talked about this a little bit over the past few months, but engaging in the no and low regrets conversation has been very constructive. Folks have been, I would say, almost surprisingly engaged. So I just wanted to give a big kudos to staff. I actually listened to the podcast that Director Riss mentioned yesterday on my drive in this morning. I know I've been on the record not being the biggest fan of the term "no and low regrets," but I must say, listening to Sean Cronin and Kat and Jeff and Ben and Eric and everyone else, they did an incredible job of articulating that, and it's good to see that leadership. And I think that is obviously what has been driving this engagement moving forward. So a lot of good conversations at the Metro Roundtable. Of course, starting primarily in November when we were really digging into the current task at hand, so storage and the climate scenarios. We had breakout groups that are meeting a couple weeks ago, and then we will be diving in more in another couple weeks. We've got our February meeting to really package things up for our feedback for the IBCC meeting. So a lot going on there. Again, it's great to see the progress. Very curious to kind of see what that input is from the other roundtables as well. So we'll keep that conversation going. And then finally, I would be remiss, of course, if I didn't touch briefly on water supply conditions. I've got, again, one slide, just one image. Don't want to be too doom and gloom, but this one for me is the one that really summed it up. This was from an email from state climatologist Russ Schumacher up at the Climate Center at CSU. We work with them in a number of ways. I think this image was also part of the presentation. I think it was just last week, that Water Conditions Monitoring Committee. But of course, this is temperature. It's been a lot of talk about snowpack levels, precipitation. You can look at all the data. This, obviously speaks for itself. Just a few splotches of 10th warmest, and most of the state being record warmest. And this is the 3 months leading up to December. And we all felt this, right? All those 60-degree days. I think the Broncos had every single game was 60 degrees or more. Of course, last week being an exception when it was one of the coldest. So certainly it was nice to see a little glimpse of winter over the last weekend. But all that to say that sets the stage for where we're at with Denver Water. We are having a lot of conversations, as you can imagine. We actually have a big briefing with our board tomorrow, and we are looking at what this landscape is. And of course, as things evolve over the next month or two, we should know a lot more by March, but we're preparing. It's very possible we could end up on some sort of drought restrictions. So we are monitoring things extremely closely. I actually had to step out at the break yesterday. We have a water shortage committee. It's our drought committee. Usually, thank God, it's typically dormant. You know, we meet annually and kind of kick the tires on the process and whatnot. This year, we are ramping up. We've got weekly meetings. We're doing everything that we can. We're starting to message with our public affairs department, starting to look at what that whole process is, and again with the board, and kind of how and when and if we may declare. So certainly a lot going on there. Again, I don't want to be too doom and gloom. You know, we've already heard a lot about this. We'll hear more. It's very much an evolving situation. Possible we could catch up. Unlikely though, you know, so we need to do our job and see what we can do to plan for the worst moving forward. So I think that's about it. Again, wanted to keep it fairly simple today, but happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Director Johnson? No, thank you. And so we'll go ahead and move on to Director Combs.
Thank you. Glad Greg didn't decide to throw that, because being a wrestler, I'd have caught it right between the eyes, man. Can't catch. So just starting off, this is I think Director Ullman did a fantastic job of summing up where we are conditionally for the state, and of course the valley is no different. But I wanted to show you something that we're looking at. In the valley, we used to have a joke that said, you know, we've got 90 growing days, but not 91. You know, we had our frost-free date was June 15th to September 15th. And if you didn't get it done in that time, you were going to pay a price. And so as times and the climate have changed a little bit, we're dealing with this issue of, and you look at the hydrograph there and you see the timing of the water, which is not much different for everybody. We're seeing this whole change in ag. And coming from a farm where we shined the shovels, you know, a lot of flood ground, a lot of that, the old ditch and canvas dam work, because that's the way Dad did it. That's the way Grandpa did it. And that's not original to us. The whole area has that kind of multi-generational, this is the way it's always been done. And so now, as technology is coming in with sprinklers and different tillage and GPS, a lot of farm families are having to make some changes of how they're viewing the future in ag, just ag as its own. And then I want to talk about this hydrograph, because about 5 years ago, we started talking about, as those of us that were managing the water districts, we started seeing this change in the timing. And if you're a farmer, you're worried about when Director Ullman's staff calls you and says, turn on, today's your day, and away you go, and you're just ready for that day. And so they don't really watch to the depth that maybe would have been beneficial to them to make a water budget for their whole year. And so we as water managers have been pushing hard for people to maybe rise the view a little bit and look at, what does the snowpack mean to you? What does it mean for your system? Can you honestly, effectively believe you can farm all the acres you own? And what transition is that going to require? Deaf ears is a compliment. It was not heard, right? My water turns on when the water hits this rock in the river. I turn on and I farm, and this is what we do. Well, Mother Nature has kind of taught us all a hard lesson that we're going to have to adapt. And what I want to show you is here is, if you look at the beginning, there in January and February, we had a huge storm that came in, and it came in mixed precip. It wasn't just all snow. A lot up high stayed as snow, the rest came as rain. And so we got this flush of water, but that's obviously before anybody can use it, right? So for us, it prepays some compact, it lowers some curtailment during the irrigation year. Something to call your attention to there in June, you look at the peak. Actually, the peak was pretty normally timed, but how low it was. Go all the way to October, the end of October, we peaked higher in October than we did in June with snow melt off with that big storm. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but in the meantime of this season, that February water came down so hard, and there was so much snow on the valley floor for a day that melted fast, the ground remained wet. So when the irrigation season started, a lot of the farmers couldn't pull their water, right? They didn't have any need for it. So we brought, okay, so on the Kineo system, which I'm speaking of particularly, it usually runs up to a peak of around 2400 CFS. And the high priorities, we have some big kind of benchmark priorities that the farmers ask, are we going to get to the 115, the Magoti, is it going to come in? That's a big indicator of a good year. Are we going to get to these benchmarks? Normally, we have to have about 2,000 feet in the river to bring in the Magoti. And we ran the Magoti this year for over 2 weeks because the ground was so wet, people couldn't pull their full priority. And this water sharing type, accidental water sharing happened, right? And we brought in more priorities for longer days than what the math would tell you we should run by the index. And so it was interesting. We've done that for 2 years now. Plus the district made a little project allocation that helped kind of fill the gaps. But we couldn't get any buy-in on any kind of conservation plan of a water sharing very similar to what the ag power type deal was. Could we develop a plan where we strategically managed our water a little different? Zero buy-in, no one would show up to the discussions. And now after 2 years, it's interesting because we had a solid year for the entire Kiness system last year with that hydrograph. And you see how below average it was, and you see the timing. Now look at the November. I wanted to talk about the October thing. When we got that on our gauges, everything above 10,000 feet got over 6 inches of rain in that period. But it was rain at the end of October. Even if it had just happened 2 weeks earlier, that would have been 6 feet of snow in that area. And we'd have been talking about a whole different discussion right now. But what we're trying to do is get our people to understand it's not the same. And so it's been interesting with this hydrograph, how many people have come in now interested, legitimately interested about talking about maybe we're gonna have to go to a winter crop variety. And we're gonna have to do winter wheat and winter oats and things like that, where we can span that winter and use the water when it's happening. But the biggest thing we're noticing is, I don't know if you noticed, but that ag power thing has a ton of potential to try to do legally. And I know the nightmare we're talking about for you I'm not trying to get out of the box for you, Director, but legally come up with a mechanism where we absolutely respect the priority system, but make it to where an exchange can legally happen. And I think through a conservation plan, there's an opportunity to respect how your farm has changed. We used to take flood water and you pulled 8 feet of water and you took that feast and famine, you had places to put it. But now as we have sprinklers, a sprinkler will only pull 2 feet of water, right? It won't pull anymore. So it doesn't matter how much it comes. And because of the way our storage works, we would pull it anyway. We would irrigate corners. We would do this. Now with this water sharing, I think we have an opportunity. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, even as bad as if we look at just the data and the math, I think there's opportunities to embrace some change that might get us into the future and make those thresholds change for us. So I think I was encouraged by how many people finally are coming into the office and listening to the concept of what could change rather than we're going to kind of willpower our way out of nature. So I'm optimistic, and I don't want to say that I'm all for climate change, but if I could grow corn in the valley, I'd be a happy person. I'd like to try that someday. So, well, it's not worth anything less than hay is worth right now. So, I mean, if you're not going to make money, I'll call Director Wind and ask for some advice. So then I may be the only person that doesn't mind the name No Low Regrets. I don't love it, but I don't lay awake at night with it. Cassandra and so Carrie and Heather are our appointees to the IBCC, and Cassandra is our vice chair of the roundtable, was tasked with kind of kicking off this discussion. And man, they set it up well. They advertised it well. We had over 100 people show up to the roundtable, either virtually or live. And I think we could have spent another hour on it. It was very engaged, a lot of ideas, a lot of concern. People wanted to know, where is this going? What does it mean for me in the future? But I was pleasantly surprised at the engagement we got and the amount of cooperation from our environment and rec areas to our pro ag and the reservoirs. And it was a lot of brainstorming of how we as a basin could start adapting to what's coming our direction. So what we did is they took tons of input, gave a short little synopsis to make sure they had captured everyone's ideas. And then at our next roundtable, they're going to give a report on what came out of our January meeting. So I think we're going to try to keep rolling through with this and stay on track with what Director Mitchell was set out yesterday in her line of dates. So I can't give enough kudos to those people for the work they've been doing for the change in the IBCC work in this direction. And then finally, I wanted to end with a thanks to Greg. We were talking at dinner last night. My first meeting was in Steamboat in March, and we had like I think it was a 4.5 hour executive session. Can't remember. It was kind of wild, and I thought, I'm gonna really like this board. But anyway, it was you show up there and you don't know what's going on, you don't know anything. And I walked out of the hotel that morning and Greg's like, here, you can ride with me. And I knew who Greg was, but I didn't know Greg. And so we rode together and from the very beginning, I've always appreciated, Greg, how you're very open in your discussion, in your leadership, and in your relationships. And I really appreciated that, because it's a little intimidating to come onto a board like this with all these experts and all this knowledge, and you walk in and you got dirt under your nails and you feel like you're just the dirt clod out of the field. And I really sincerely appreciate that. And I think you're the only one on the board that, when I talk about Capuline, knows what that means. And it's where I grew up and where I went to middle school. And we took our kids past that the other day on the way up Lahare Reservoir, and they thought we went to a prison school because as the bars over rough area. But anyway, when I talk about Capuline, Greg gets it. He's been there and he got out of there as fast as he could too. So anyway, Greg, in all seriousness, I wanted to tell you how much I appreciate you and your friendship. And I'm glad that the friendship doesn't end just because your tenure here on the board does. So thanks a lot. That's all I have.
Thank you, Director Combs. Are there any questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to Director Camlin.
No, I can use this. Thanks, though. I want to touch base on that. Apparently you do really good with new board members, because I told you yesterday, I had anxiety about getting on this, and then, I met with you and Nathan, and don't think you're off the hook, because we're still going to be calling you and saying, hey, what do you think? So we'll keep you close. I don't have a whole lot today, especially in the water world. I do want to discuss a little bit kind of on what Nathan was talking about was, last year. So we measure our water on the ranch. I think I mentioned before, from December 1st till the end of November, we were 4 inches short last year. We're going into, spring. It's looking pretty dang scary. What does that look like for us? Less cattle, less hay, that kind of thing. We've been working with Trout Unlimited for several years now, and we're finally going to launch our program this summer. And we've got CSU involved with the Enriches thing, and we're going to start converting some of our hay ground to alternate crops, like Director Combs was talking about. We're going to look at less water use, more productive crops, better soil health. And my big priority is making money at it, because you can't make money without water. So when you take the water element out of it, the money goes away. But by gosh, I'm going to try to see what we can come up to. So I'm pretty excited about that project. We'll launch that, like I said, this summer. So I might become a little bit of a farmer. I do not have a green thumb, but I'll learn. So then my next thing I wanted to visit about is I still do a lot of travel or whatever, and I'm a big believer of, continuing education. And so next week I get to go to the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, their big cattle con or cattle conference or whatever in Nashville. And I'm really looking forward to that. We will, they've got the water committees, and, instead of on a state basis or whatever, we'll sit down with all those producers and discuss nationally, you know, what's going on with water legislation, drought, you know, all the same topics we do here, just on a national level. And so I'm really looking forward to that. And then of course, you know, they have legislative sessions. And then they've got what they call, cattle college. And so you can pick different colleges you can go to. They're like a couple hour sessions or whatever. And it's, you know, you can pick one on water, on farming, on, you know, health, that kind of thing. So looking forward to that, be out there for a week. And then, as soon as I get back from that, I go to a financial conference in Orange Beach, Alabama every year. And I will take off and go to that as soon as I get back from Nashville. And I always look forward to that too. It's a real brain twister, but then you get a little bit of fun time at the end too. And the food is always great down there. So I'm not sure I'll come back with a suntan this time because it's cold down there now, but by gosh, I'll try. So, I think that's all I have today.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Director Camblin? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to Director Haas.
Thank you, Chairwoman Cloud. Like many, I want to thank Greg. It's sad that we only get a year, but what I really appreciate is your thoughtfulness, like and I think we really saw that in particular. Oh, thank you. I just have one slide. So was during Shoshone, just really digging into that because you weren't in that basin, but you really took the time to understand every nuance and ask the hard questions. So thank you for how you show up. I appreciate that. Yeah, and knowing that you're still in this world, I have a feeling we'll see you again. So yeah, I think, how do I make the slide go? Okay, I know we all saw this yesterday, but I did want to just point out what really strikes me about this, what's happening with the drought and the way it's setting up, is that really dark red spot, or those, you know, red and dark red, are where most of our water comes from for the Colorado Basin, as well as the North Platte. You know, North Park. That is the headwaters. And so all droughts are not equal. And like that will have a disproportionate impact, I think, to our water supply if it doesn't start to turn around at some point. And like Greg said, it's unlikely that we will catch up, but you know, we've seen miracle Mays, we've seen miracle Aprils, so keep doing your snow dances. It's serious. And I think, of course, the fire risk is the other thing that is top of mind for our communities in the Colorado Basin, just because of where that is setting up. And you know, I really am supportive of Chris Sturm's program and the wildfire ready action plans. I think, like he said yesterday, we don't want to wait until we're in a crisis. So I know most of the counties that I talk to are doing those plans, and I think it's going to be really, really important for us to have, you know, do what we can to minimize that fire risk, because I think it could be a really tough summer. And then just kind of on the basin-wide perspective, you know, we've talked a lot about the Colorado Basin this meeting, but you know, Lake Powell last week was at 27%. Lake Mead was at 34%. Like, we are going into this year with really low reservoir levels, and that is really scary. And Greg and I were talking beforehand about 2002, and for those who were here that year and remember how low the flows were, I mean, during runoff, it looked like it was a drought year in August. It was just like trickles. And so to see what our runoff is going to look like this year is something I think we're all watching anxiously. The other thing that I've been watching is every time the Bureau of Reclamation makes a forecast, the next forecast, it drops. So we're, like I think Michelle said this yesterday, we lost 2 million acre feet in the forecast from this November to now. That is crazy. And so you know, I hope we'll just keep investing in our forecasting, but also, you know, just the fact that even when we think we know what we're going to get, we don't know what we're going to get. So keep your fingers crossed. And I just, you know, I really appreciate all the state does to just help everyone adapt to this this kind of future that we're seeing more and more. So I did reach out to constituents just to find out what's going on in the basin, what the concerns are, what people are thinking about. A couple bright spots, and then a couple of comments about how the CWCB can support water users. So the River District wanted to share that they've got a few different grant programs that they're launching to, one is to help a grant round to support irrigation and ditch companies in completing capital improvement plans and rate studies to make sure that they're going to do this in a way that ditch companies and irrigation companies can do planning that will make sure it also has the funding eventually to pay for that on time. And so they're trying to figure out how to help their constituents, just do better planning. And I think that's very complementary to what CWCB does. And so hopefully that program launches February 15th. And if people in the basin, and that's obviously not just the main stem, but Yampa White and Gunnison. And so if people are interested, to contact Amy Moyer and Melissa Wills. They're also doing a financial assessment toolkit, which is a spreadsheet-based tool to help to identify future projects, and then also, again, do the financing to figure out how water managers can plan for infrastructure over time. So I just always think about Maybell and like what a big lift that was. But if you're a small district, you don't always have the tools to do that. So again, I really appreciate trying to figure out the tools that we can help our water users adapt to the future. So a few additional comments came from Kate Collins in the Middle Colorado Watershed Council. They're struggling a lot with IWMPs and the implementation of those, and hoping that we can maybe use those to be more living documents that can be adapted more frequently, and to get just the support in that middle ground, that middle space between planning and implementation. They've said that they could use some more just support in helping adapt to that not being stagnant, but being living documents. And then the other thing she asked for, or just said would be really helpful, is additional CWCB leadership in practical guidance for the fluvial hazard zone mapping. Just that a lot of communities see it as a negative thing. They're like, rather than seeing it as a tool that could be really valuable, they see it as like, oh God, that's going to be regulatory, or that's going to be, it's going to impact my insurance or whatever. So people are nervous about it. And she was just saying, we could use some support normalizing it, helping people see the value in it. So I just wanted to pass that along. And then a couple final thoughts. We talked a lot yesterday about the interim guidelines and the DEIS process. And I just want to remind everybody, there's a lot that comes after that. So even if we get through it, I really feel like that the value in this board is going to be helping our state adapt afterwards, because whatever comes out of that process, there's going to be changes in terms of thinking about how much water is available, how do we share this river across 7 states and 2 countries. And that doesn't just implicate the Colorado River Basin, it impacts all of our basins, because we are all seeing less and less water and more erratic, I think, to your point, Nathan. Or just more variable. The future is not going to look like the past. And so how do we help our water users adapt to that? And so I'm really looking forward to how we can do that as a state. And then just on a personal note, I mentioned to a few folks, I am leaving for New Zealand on Friday, and I'll be there for a long time, like about 5 weeks. And I just really can't wait to learn more about their rivers and how they manage. And they have one of the first rivers that was named as personhood. And it's going to be right near where we're staying. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about just, global rivers. I mean, we're all in this together. Water is water. And so I'll hopefully have good stories when I get back. And that is all.
Are there any questions for Director Haas? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stick to the agenda this time instead of skipping around. So, I know. I don't like to stick to, just kidding, I'm kidding. So I don't have any slides, and I know I'm terrible at presentations. It's like a pet peeve of mine, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. PowerPoint's not my friend, but I'll try and do better going forward and making sure that you all have pictures, because I do have some things I would like to share. But I just have a couple of quick updates. Like for my roundtable in my area, the Southwest area, we've got a couple of new members that have joined the roundtable. So I just want to make sure that they're also recognized. And I'm not going to say their names because I don't know some of these individuals. So I just want to make sure that their privacy is also I'm not violating anything that they wouldn't want out there right now, but I also want to thank all those that have served on the roundtable prior, because some of those positions when you take that on, is sometimes they're not easy, and you volunteer a lot of your time, and sometimes that's really hard for people, but that's it's a thankless job, just like what we do here, and so I just want to recognize those individuals. The Southwest Water Seminar in my area will be held at the Skyett Casino on the reservation, Southern Ute Reservation, on March 27th. So mark your calendars. It's the 42nd annual seminar. And so there should be some very good conversations going on during that time. So please come spend some time with us there. I do want to say, like, in my area, we're very dry, very, very dry. It's a common theme for everybody. And so I don't want to spend too much time on the doom and gloom of what that is, but Greg mentioned like the glimpses of winter, and I hope that's not our thing for years to come. And we're always saying the glimpses of winter or glimpses of snowpack, because I hope that, and I pray that that gets turned around, that we do start having the snowpack that we need, not just for the human consumption, but also for nature, because it provides the berries and all the microorganisms that we need for, for our animals, particularly for the people, the bears, because we want to make sure that they're sleeping very well, all winter. And when they come out of hibernation, that they have the berries and all the other things that they need to for fortitude going forward. And so stuff like that, I think about all the time, and just hopefully it changes. I'm very, very hopeful that changes. Speaking of hopeful and changes, I just want to say, Greg has been a very interesting person that I have met a couple of years ago. I say that because I don't know Greg very well, like most everybody, and I heard all the accolades about him, and he is a very rare individual that that we became very good friends, I would say. I say he's rare because he is kind, caring, he's very well spoken, speaks very asks really good questions, and he's just this person that you can just rely on, and in this day and age, that's rare. And so I just want to thank you, Greg. And that is all that I have. And is there any questions? So please never ask me anything about PowerPoint, because not my thing. So we'll go ahead and move on to Director McLeod.
Well, I have to start with my Greg Felt stories, because I've known Greg for a long, long time, long before he was appointed to this board. I spend a lot of time fly fishing, and Heidi enjoys it as well. But every fisherman's dream is having a wife who can row, right? So I hired Greg to teach Heidi to row. The effort was not successful, but it wasn't for lack of effort on Greg's part. We've taken many trips down the Arkansas using Greg's guides. They're great. If you ever go over there to fish, be sure you go to Ark Anglers. Shortly after Greg was appointed to this board, I ran into him at the Water Congress Convention in Denver, and I said, Greg, you're going to love this board. I mean, you're going to get to travel around the state to meetings. You're going to get to meet a lot of interesting people. Well, the next year at the Water Congress Convention, he walked up to me and he said, you lied. The meetings are all virtual, and we always go to Denver. But as you all said, He's been great to sit next to on this board. He's been giving us tremendous guidance. We appreciate your service, Greg. Sorry to see you go. So I do have a report. No and low regrets. The Gunnison Basin Roundtable has dived in. There's a special subcommittee created to work on, especially on storage. Because in our basin, the main thing we want to talk about in storage is maintaining what we have. We have a lot of aging infrastructure that needs repair and improvement. And that's, I think, going to be our focus in the Gunnison Basin. Our roundtable chair is here to keep an eye on me, Wendell. So, yeah, we're giving it a good effort for the meeting in February. Here's what the storage looks like in the Gunnison River Basin. These reservoir levels look relatively low, but especially with Taylor Park and Blue Mesa, this is not unusual for this time of the year. I mean, they're at about 90% of median for January because typically we don't get a lot of inflow to the reservoirs until spring. The question is whether we'll get any inflow at all. So this is, Director Ullman showed us the statewide map of soil moisture and snow water equivalent. This is the Gunnison Basin. And I put these slides together. I was very diligent. I did this last Thursday, and then it snowed all day Friday. So all the statistics changed. So I redid this to make it updated as of yesterday. And if you can see the numbers, the precipitation is almost average. I mean, it's 90-some% of average, but the SWE is half. So we've got a lot of precipitation in terms of the 30-year median, but what is left is at a very low level. So here's the SNOTEL reading from the Blue Mesa group. And that little blip, the little blue line at the bottom is this year, the green is last year, and the dotted line is the 30-year median. And that little blip on the end of the blue line is what that snowstorm gave us on Friday. But you can see that we're well below the median at this point in terms of snow water equivalent at the SNOTELs. That's 5 different SNOTELs surrounding Blue Mesa. Going up to Taylor Park Reservoir, a similar situation. A little bit more of a bump up in Taylor Park. Those SNOTELs are a little higher elevation, but here again, you can see that we're well below the 30-year median. So it doesn't foretell a very promising future in the Gunnison Basin anyway. The Upper Gunnison District, along with several cooperators, and you can see the list of folks who joined in that effort, did a study of harmful algal blooms in Blue Mesa Reservoir. These are toxic algae blooms. When they occur, Park Service has to issue no contact orders for humans and pets because the blooms are toxic. You can see what they look like there. They arise primarily in the Iola Basin, which is the east end of Blue Mesa Reservoir. The USGS folks conducted this study. Some of the Upper Gunnison staff helped with the sampling. They used data that went back to 1970, and then with the on-site testing in 21, 22, 23, they came up with results. And the result of the study is that there really are no control efforts we can make. I mean, the outside nutrients, external nutrients are not the cause. The algae grows from natural sources when the water is low and warm. So the only thing that can be done to mitigate these harmful blooms is to keep the reservoir level higher than 7,400 feet above sea level. And this is a matter of significant concern when we talk about releases from the upper initial units to support Lake Powell, because if they pull down Blue Mesa for that purpose, we're going to see more and more of this. The Curragh County National Recreation Area, which is surrounding Blue Mesa Reservoir, brings about 1 million visitor days a year to our community, and having toxic blooms in the reservoir could have a significant economic impact on our folks as well. So we are very concerned about not only the algae, but also the idea that reclamation could pull water out of this reservoir to support Lake Powell, which of course, Lake Powell is important to all of us, but we want to make sure they recognize all of the impacts. Unfortunately, what they've told us so far is they don't take any of this into consideration when they make releases from the reservoir. You know, we're not interested, so. The Gunnison Basin Roundtable recently completed this Gunnison Basin Handbook. We had one in 2013. We thought it needed to be updated, and you can see from the table of contents all of the items that we covered. It's intended to educate folks in our basin and everywhere about who we are, what we do, what's going on in the basin. It talks about the roundtable activities. It has a little section on water use and water law, and it's currently online. If you are fascinated with the Gunnison Basin, you can look at GunnisonRiverBasin.com and look at this. It's about 50 pages, well illustrated. It's a beautiful piece of work. And in the Gunnison Basin, there's a group that does this game where people sit down and do a scenario where they are assigned a spot and said, you have a drought. What are you going to do about it? So it's, yeah, and they've done 2 of them. And it's been very successful. Adults and children both get to play interactive game and learn about responses to drought. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Are there any questions we have Director Vasquez?
John, I have a question about this algae. If there is a drawdown to the river, what's the survivability of this toxic algae in the river? And do we end up with the same problem in Powell?
We recognize that possibility. If you notice, some of the participants were water providers downstream. We weren't able to do anything to trace the toxicity downstream in this study, but it's something we may have to look at in the future.
Dr. Combs?
John, how long does that bloom last? How long does it stay toxic? What's the end to end when the water's, inaccessible?
When the water gets cold, the algae dies. So in wintertime, when it freezes, that end of the reservoir freezes first because it's so shallow. So that's when the algae is killed, is just by cold temperature.
So you would lose access to the water the entire summer when the water temperature is up?
Sorry?
You would lose access to the water for the majority of the summer when the water temperature is up?
That's correct. At least that end of the reservoir, because as you go further west, the reservoir gets deeper and there's less of the algae blooms.
Are there any more questions for Director McLeod? Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to Director Vasquez, Vice Chair Vasquez.
I experienced you first when I was in the subcommittee, as we were just talking about earlier today, to be confirmed for my initial appointment. And since then, in addition to all the accolades that you have received, I just want to say your open-heartedness, your humanity in this public environment is really unique. And it gives everybody else permission to be a human being when you're in the public eye. Not only is that unusual, it's very unusual for a man. And so I just want to thank you for being my friend and serving on this board and serving the state of Colorado as you have done. So thank you. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a sexist comment, isn't it? From a woman. Second, I want to say our roundtable met last week. We jumped into the low and no regrets brainstorming that was asked for from IBCC on storage. Carrie Boroff, who is our chair, did a great job. Kat was on online for us, which we really appreciated. And Jeff joined later. Everybody had an opinion and they felt comfortable making it, whether it was positive or negative. But a lot of good ideas surfaced. And I think it was a very positive step in our tiny basin where volunteerism is required because our population is so low. So it's the same cohort of people who do a lot of different jobs in the basin and in the county. So it was a positive experience. I want to spend a few minutes and talk about a study that's been going on in the basin that underscores how can we do more with what we get in terms of precipitation. So I want to talk about a project that came to the North Platte Basin Roundtable from the Colorado State Forest in the person of Blair Reinierson. He's the manager of the Colorado State Forest up there in North Park. And he came to the basin asking for financial support to do a service project for thinning lodgepole pines on the state forest. And a number of our roundtable members say, what? You want us to fund another state agency with our money? And basically it was a, why would we do it? What is the purpose related to water? And of course, Blair was quite eloquent in explaining the link between forest and watershed health and water downstream for use by ag and municipal and other uses in the basin and piscatorial. But they were really uncomfortable being the only funder. And so they challenged Blair and said, go find some other money, show us that other people are interested or other entities are interested. And he put his head down and went out and did that and brought together several colors of money to get this project done. So in addition to the water supply reserve account grant that they applied for and won, they brought in money from both North Park and statewide habitat protection program, state land board enhancement fund, excuse me, and some money from CPW oil and gas mitigation fund. So blending that money together, he pulled together almost $500,000 for this thinning project. And it's a service project because they had cut the forest about 25 years ago. They had a dog hair forest and it really needed to be thinned. There's no commercial value to what you're cutting. So it definitely has to be funded. And so the two different colors of money funded thinning on various slopes on the Colorado State Forest that are in the Michigan watershed headwaters, and then some on Owl Mountain and Elk Mountain state lands. So for a total of almost 600 acres. The treatments for the other money was focused on improving grazing and wildlife habitat. So they did 9x9 spacing burn pile treatment. For the slopes that we were interested in terms of water production, they did 8x8 foot spacing with a lop and scatter. So roughness of the surface to hold the snow. And so the focus there, watershed health and our snow reservoir in the Michigan. And I want to really thank Blair and all the other folks that he's working with in keeping us informed as this project goes on. So that started in 2024. And I always use a map of the basin that's blank, just highlighting the water, but I'm just pointing out where we're talking about geographically, the state forest on the southeast side of the basin that forms the Michigan and Canadian headwaters, and various elements of state land board in light blue. So the project objectives were to reduce competition in this overcrowded forest, which would benefit Colorado State Forest in improving timber quality, also mitigate future wildfire risk. Open up the canopy. What that means is less snow is caught by the trees, subject to sublimation and wind and sun, and more of it gets to the ground. Reduce transpiration in the summer when the trees are growing, reducing the water use on the land. And for those additional colors of money to increase the understory browse for wildlife and cattle. So here's some pictures that Blair was shared with us. You can see the before on the left and the after on the right for the burn pile approach to clear the understory. And then the treatment for water yield. You can see how dense that forest is, and after thinning, the lop and scatter, increasing the roughness on the surface. They put in meteorological stations in each of the 3 treatment areas. They've had collaboration with CSU. And I want to call out the student Jocelyn Kramer, who summarized the data from 2025. She works under Professor Fastnacht at CSU. And so they measured air temperature, soil temperature, airspeed, high and low, relative humidity. And the one that really stands out, although there are differences in all of those metrics, is the volumetric water content. And it's unequivocal. You can see the burn pile data, they got the station in late. You can see it in red. The blue is the lop and scatter. This is October through January of this past season. And the volumetric water content is almost twice in the treated versus untreated. Now, not everybody has dog hair forests, thank heavens, but this is an opportunity in those cases where we have really, really dense forest, that there can be management. It costs money, but there's going to be value to the water users downslope. In addition, they've been collaborating with Steve Reeves of CWCB. They set up 3 snow courses, and they're supposed to be sampling them starting this month, but there's not a whole lot of snow, so I'm not quite sure what their schedule is. Fortunately, the money runs through fall 2027, so we have a couple of winters to try and add this data to the meteorological data. So with that, take any questions you have.
And Director Cameron?
So I think that that's a really good presentation. All I ask is keep us informed, bring it back. I'd love
Definitely.
to see what the data comes out on that. I think they're headed in the right direction with that.
Yeah.
We
Glad to.
need to do something with our forests, a lot of them, so.
Right, and the clear cutting is not the answer, right? And so the problem is it costs money, right? And where does that money come from, particularly in the current environment in terms of federal funding and the staff cuts in Forest Service? It's going to be a real challenge. Yeah.
Director Combs?
So Director Best, I was just compliment you on that roundtable, bringing in that idea to go get more money and that collaborative look. I think you're going to see some big benefits from this. And I'm like, Director Cameron, I'd really like to see the interest, because not to be derogatory, but sometimes our people that hold the permits and the range and everything are very protective of that. And I think this will be a great opportunity to show the benefit of a little bit of conservation work in all that area for everybody. So
Yeah.
the data on that will be definitely useful.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's to Blair's credit that he just kept putting his head down to go find that money and come back to us. And it relaxed the stubbornness of some of the roundtable members against doing something that sounded like conservation or environmental work.
Director Haas?
Yeah, I'm also excited to see where this heads, but what are you calling it? Dog hair forest?
Yeah.
What is that?
Just the trees are way too close.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they're what kinds of trees?
They're lodgepole pine.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions for Director Vasquez? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to Director Wind.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like others, Director Feld, I want to say thank you. Thank you for being that welcoming face for my first 2 years on the board. It was extremely helpful. Thus far, among other adjectives, you've been called interesting and unusual. I'm not going to go quite that far, but you're inquisitive, and your nature around your questions, really facilitate a rich conversation around some of the challenging topics we have, and we all have something to learn from that. I look forward to our ongoing relationship as a fellow Conservancy District Manager. There's probably 10 or 12 Conservancy District Managers that get together, usually virtually, but at least 1 or 2 times face to face to talk about the business of the business. That's a group that was prompted by no other than Sean Cronin, who's the extrovert in the group, always likes to have a party. The rest of us are primarily folks who prefer to look at our shoes. But Sean pulls us along, and I look forward to visiting about Conservancy District matters moving forward. So thank you. No slide deck today. I want to mention just a few things within the basin. I think first and foremost, a little bit around hydrology. I think all of us are trying to find a little bit of a silver lining around this changing in weather we're facing, to keep things a little bit more upbeat, and perhaps on the South Platte Basin, among other parts of the state, what a warm winter can do. It fills reservoirs a little bit more quickly. We started with, I wouldn't call it a significant hole in the South Platte Basin with regard to storage levels, but certainly well below average. And when you have a warm winter, you can run canals a lot harder, ice-free. And that, of course, happened until last week, but it brought reservoirs almost up to average. And because of that icing now, of course, we have a fairly junior call, a quite junior call on the South Platte until some of that ice goes away. But again, warmer winters perhaps can make storage a little bit more, storage capture a little bit more efficient moving forward. News around the South Platte Roundtable. We have new leadership. I want to express my appreciation and thanks to Sean Chambers, who's been chair of the roundtable for several years. He's got a lot on his plate, has stepped away from that leadership role, and Scott Grabling is the new chair of the South Platte Roundtable. And Scott comes to us from the St. Brand Left-Hand Water Conservancy District as a water resource engineer, and will serve that group very ably moving forward. I'm excited for Scott in that role. A little closer to home, certain conservancy district in northern Colorado has uranium for sale. Just an update. You got to find some humor on some things. We do have a very nice dam that's fully completed. Valves have been tested. I bring this up because we'd anticipated putting a little bit of fill into that reservoir to start modeling and understanding how the mineralized uranium that's largely in the dam embankment, upstream, of course, of the asphalt core, how that uranium is going to engage with water as water flows into the dam. And we put that on hold. We'd hoped to do that in October. Then we were thinking November, December. We're really trying to get our good data set to understand uranium in the nearby groundwater to get a good baseline on those levels prior to the fill of that reservoir, or frankly, a partial fill. At the same time, we continue to look for mitigation options, probably leaning toward a in-reservoir treatment train to lower the uranium levels that are anticipated, at least in the short term, in that reservoir body as it slowly fills over what's likely to be 5, 6, 7 years. So that's been a learning lesson for all of us. The last item, Madam Chair, I just want to bring up is maybe a plea of concern around all the news coming at us around data centers and just the uncertainty on how we're going to serve up the resources necessary for such centers. I can't think of anything in my 35-year career in water resource management that is hitting us as quickly, other than climate change. We've got to get ready for that. And earlier in my career, I had thought that, as we get smarter, as we advance technology around water resource, that surely life's going to become more certain. And it's not done that, probably not in any front. And when I read some of the information coming out related to proposed data center right on the Wyoming-Colorado border, the numbers are staggering. in terms of power production, energy needs. 10 gigawatts at full build out. 10 gigawatts. Well, the way I put that in perspective is when I was a youngster in Morgan County, XL built Pawnee Power Plant. I remember it being a big deal because it brought in a lot of good athletes when I was in junior high. And that was really paid dividends when we were in high school playing football. But there's a bigger world out there. Pawnee Power Plant's 505 megawatts. It's built came online in 1981. So kind of a little bit bigger than average. It's now the coal element, as I understand, is being decommissioned. It's flipping to natural gas, but it's about a half a gigawatt. And if you travel down I-76, it captures your view on the landscape is pretty monumental. And when you think about a data center near Cheyenne that at full build out could be 10 gigawatts, that's 20 Pawnee power plants. I can't even grapple with that. Thinking about renewable energy as it might be applied toward that new facility, City County Denver is about 153 square miles, if you're curious. Solar panels necessary to create 10 gigawatts, my simple math is about 60 to 65% of the City and County Denver, that land mass would have to be covered in solar panels to create that kind of energy during the daytime. Not sure what happens at night, but during the daytime. So energy, obviously there's a nexus to water. I just think all hands on deck. The quicker we can understand that uncertainty. I know there's, I think, one bill that's been dropped related to that. I understand there might be another one. We just need to engage at the highest level possible to really try to create some certainty as we plan for the future around energy and water. I can't think of anything that's hitting us any quicker than these new facilities. So that's not exactly a silver lining, but thank you.
I was trying to stay away from the doom and gloom, but thanks, Brad. Just kidding. Before I turn this over to, or is there any questions for Director Vasquez?
Yeah, data centers are front of mind for me every day, all day, because of the potential impact to water and the power issues. I believe Crusoe Energy is the partner for that big one. Crusoe Energy is very present in Jackson County. They have mobile units that sell themselves as a solution for stranded gas assets. And so we have close to 40 of them on pad on shale oil and gas operations in Jackson County. My curiosity about this build out in Cheyenne is because there are so many shale oil wells up there above the Colorado-Wyoming border, whether they plan to do the same thing there, and that is to bleed off the natural gas, the field gas, and their generators run on field gas. They don't purify it to the point where it could be put in a pipeline. So you can look at that as a positive or a negative. For me, it was a surprise. We thought they're going to get all the gas out of Jackson County and go burn it somewhere else. So we have this distributed power plant in the southwest quadrant of Jackson County. The only regulation for that is the air quality permits, which are done one at a time, right? For each of these units, and they can be removed in a day. They're modular. And so I'm going to be very curious to see what they plan to do there, because if it's a cut and paste from what they've done in Jackson County and other places in Wyoming and North Dakota, it could be a repeat of that kind of use of field gas.
Are there any more questions for Director Nguyen? Before I turn this over to Director Feld, I forgot to mention something, and I was really trying hard to remember the context. So maybe Director Russ can remind me, because it was during the Shoshone hearing, the first one in Durango, and emotions were a little peaked. And Lauren tells me something along the lines that Greg is a little concerned about all of the emotions or something going on in the room, and we kind of like, I just looked there, I was like, is it because his last name is Felt? So I think that also lends to all the heartfelt emotions that you have, but you also have ignite in others. So I'll turn this over to Director Felt.
Okay, thank you, Lorelei. A couple basin updates and then I'll bring it back to the room here. I want to thank Lauren yesterday for providing some clarification on the situation with the Arkansas Valley conduit. I think it's maybe sort of indicative of the times we're in that what struck me as a fairly frustrating but fairly simple situation became so difficult for the media to report either correctly or correctly in a way that people could understand. And in turn, I think even when it was reported correctly, just the average readership maybe drew conclusions that weren't actually correct. But just to be clear, again, that legislation that was beyond bipartisan, right? It was nonpartisan. 100% support in the Senate and the House was vetoed. But that legislation, what it was aimed at doing was just had to do with the repayment terms to the Bureau of Reclamation. And what's difficult about the situation is that the local communities are on the hook for about 35% of the debt. So this was an effort to extend that repayment time, lower the interest rate, and contemplate the possibility of the federal government forgiving all or part of the debt. So it really was legislation designed just to not to ensure that the project gets built, but to ensure that the local communities were able to benefit from it and not be, saddled with more than they can handle. Repayment doesn't start until the project's complete. That's going to be a while. So there's opportunity to rerun this legislation in a more favorable environment. And meanwhile, they're digging right now. They're putting pipes in the ground right now. This project's moving forward after 60 some years of being contemplated, and we'll see it through. And thanks in part to, in fact, it wouldn't be probably underway without the support of CWCB and the Water and Power Development Authority. Having that state commitment really helps with the federal side. So I just want to be clear on that. The other thing I want to share, we've seen that drought monitor map of Colorado several times in the last 24 hours. And as Director Haas was talking about this morning, that it's not just any old dark red, it's dark red where over an area that gets a lot of snow, that is of outsized importance, not just to the Colorado River Basin, which I would point out, it's the only area of extreme drought in the entire 7-state Colorado River Basin. But it's also where significant Trans Mountain water comes from as well. So the Fryark Project collection system, it's right in the middle of that kind of purple extreme drought area there in eastern Pitkin County. The Twin Lakes Tunnel and collection system, it's right there. The Homestake Project, it's right in that same vicinity. And then some of our smaller, the Busk Ivanhoe, the Ewing, the Wirtz, there's a bunch of little smaller Trans Mountain diversions, all coming out of that same area. And so, the idea with that supplemental water from across the mountains, it's true to have more water, particularly in the Arkansas, which is a huge basin and a very dry basin. But it's also just to diversify the portfolio so that when we're having a rough time, hopefully we've got maybe other areas to draw from that are doing a little better. And it is really alarming to have this driest spot in the whole Colorado River Basin supplying the Arkansas Basin, which is the driest basin, right? In the worst start to the, whatever your slide was, Greg, we're the driest basin in Colorado. I've often joked in dry years that, well, at least we're not Nathan. At least we're not the Rio Grande. They're always worse off than us, and they're not. We're in the worst situation in the state. So whoever takes my seat can update you on how it goes. Certainly there is opportunity to improve. In fact, I will just say in 1995, at this time in the year, in fact, even mid-February, we were at about 65% of normal. I was part of a group of outfitters that went to talk to the director of, it was called Division of Parks and Outdoor Recreation. Lori Matthews was the director. And we went to talk to her about, hey, you got to find more water for us for the flow program. This is looking desperate. We're at 65% and it's the middle of February. That ended up being the biggest water year I experienced in 40 years as a river guide. The Arkansas River peaked at about 7,000 CFS. It's still running 2,000 at Labor Day through the Royal Gorge. I mean, I remember putting in a trip at Fisherman's Bridge on June 13th and it was snowing on us. So I agree wholeheartedly with Director Ullman that, you know, he said we need 145% snowpack from here on out statewide to get back to normal. But it's not impossible for things to improve. Just put it that way. So let's just keep hoping and we'll see what happens, but really concerning. Let's see here. I want to talk to you all a little bit about this board and your role going forward. A couple things really hit home for me yesterday about the current status of this board. It's a very interesting time. We've had a number of changes in the board that were out of sequence and unanticipated. And the net result of that is I'm going off now after 6 years. The next 3 people sort of following me, Nathan, Lorelei, and Barbara, are all up for reappointment right now. With the exception of the person who replaces me, you have the strong potential of having the same board for 3 more years. Very stable. I think that's really important because as we know, we're after 8 years or 7 years, we're heading into, we're going to have a new governor this time next year. There's always change, right? Even when people do a great job, especially at the cabinet level. You know, it's unlikely that Dan Gibbs would be our DNR director again. It just is, right? It's just a fact. And that can trickle down and we can have, you know, you can end up getting new executive directors at the division level. Again, not because of anybody's performance, but just because of politics. I hope to hell whoever wins the election has the sense to keep Lauren in her chair. And I'm going to encourage them, but that could change, right? It really could. And so this stable board is a really important thing. When I came on in 2020, there was a really good feeling, I felt like, in the agency. But it was also felt like that good feeling when there's sort of positive change and some sort of maybe a relief and from some of the past things. And I really so appreciate the work Becky did to strengthen the culture, the agency culture at CWCB. I think she really kind of mothered it, it seems to me, and really encouraged people. If you were around those meetings back then, there were tears at every CWCB meeting. There was a lot of emotion, a lot of just a lot of people kind of processing things and moving forward. She handed off a really different agency to Lauren than the one that she received. And I think Lauren's done a really great job in her own way and her own style and in the context of unique challenges. But to continue that overall really positive, I don't like to use the word family in this kind of context, but a very supportive, healthy culture. People really respect each other. We heard about the awards that were given out, the peer-to-peer stuff yesterday. It's fantastic, really great. And so I mention this just because we don't know what's going to happen with leadership of this agency, but it seems pretty likely that all of you are here for quite a while. And I know the staff have a lot of strength. There's some great leaders there, and you know, there's great momentum going forward. But I think it's really important that as a board, you all recognize that that you're sort of this foundation that maybe a lot of staff don't interact with all the time, but you need to be there for them and whoever is in charge. Again, hopefully it's Lauren, but if not, that new person, you need to guide them and you need to make sure they understand what an incredible agency this is, what an incredible working team this is, and what an incredibly caring group of people this is, and that it has translated into just really remarkable improvements in kind of the delivery to the public, to our constituents. We can't let that slip. So I don't want it to go unsaid. I'm charging you guys. It's keep that in front of you. Keep that in mind. The last 24 hours have been an experience I've never had before. It's very humbling, almost hard to comprehend. I can't speak to what everybody has said, but it means so much to me. And yeah, Lorelei, I guess I've tried to put my heart into this. I've felt like this quite likely to be sort of pinnacle of my career, being on this board, and it's just meant a lot to me, and I've learned an awful lot from it. So thank you for all the nice words. It's been really humbling. Lauren yesterday mentioned my my experience or my career working on the river. And I really appreciated you saying that, because to me, I always, when I was in college and, I went to a fancy competitive college and everything, but I always told people I was a boatman, went to school in the off season. Really, that's my priority. That's who I really am. And one point in college, I took a whole year off just to boat all year. I just loved it so much, and I still do. It truly has informed my view of water, navigating it, swimming in it, just being in it all the time. And it's informed my view of leadership and of how you work with people to try to achieve things that you might not be able to achieve alone, working as a team. And she mentioned this sort of rule or maxim I have about rigging for a flip. So I wanted to speak to that a little bit more. When in 1987, I think it was the year that I just boated all year, didn't go to college. I was at this really sweet spot in my boating career where the Peter principle hadn't kicked in yet. So I hadn't been promoted into management. I was a guide and a trip leader. And I was mostly doing multi-day wilderness trips all over western Colorado, northern New Mexico, and a little bit into Wyoming. And There was one point where I spent, we were based over on the Arkansas, but I spent 27 days on the West Slope. I had a van and all this gear, and they kept sending different teams of guides and boats and food out to me. And I'd move to the next river and trip lead another trip. And it was like Dolores, Westwater, Gunnison Gorge, Westwater, Desolation Canyon. Like I'd never went home, never went back to the base. I just stayed out there. And between the trips, I often would have maybe a day, and I'd have to, clean some gear and maybe buy some stuff, whatever. But I had some time to just reflect. And it was so intense just being out there all the time, being on the river all day, cooking next to the river, sleeping next to the river, bathing in the river. And some things came into focus for me, and they crystallized. And I thought, man, I should write a book about what you can learn from the river. But so much of it just condensed down to 3 simple things. And so I thought maybe I'd just share those with you on my way out the door here. So the first one, Lauren mentioned yesterday, rig for a flip. And I recognize that some of you are boaters and some of you aren't. So if you're not, I don't know, bear with me, or maybe you can find a way to make use of it. I don't know. But rigging for a flip is really important, right? If you part of the thrill of whitewater, part of the inherent joy of it is the inherent risk of it, right? It is the real world. It's not Disneyland. Things can go wrong. And we always said there's 2 kinds of boaters, those who have flipped and those who will. It's almost an inevitability. And so if you're honest with yourself, you could be the best boater in the world, but if you're honest with yourself, you have to acknowledge that mishap is part of the equation out there. And so, especially when you're thinking about multi-day river trips in remote settings, you have with you what you have when you start. There's no resupply along the way. There's often no help. There's no communication. You really have to be self-sufficient and self-reliant. And often what you're carrying on your boat isn't just what matters to you, but it's gear, it's food, it's, God help you, the beer. You can't, if you flip, that's fine. Like I said, it happens to everybody. But if you flip and we turn your boat back over and the stuff's not there anymore, that's a problem. That's a really big problem. And so, as I was teaching hundreds of young people how to do this stuff over the years, that's a really important lesson to learn. That you need to eliminate all the variables that you can control. You need to mitigate the risk, not just for yourself, but for everybody else who's relying on you. So rig for a flip is really the first rule of the river. The second one is make friends at the put-in. If you're a commercial rafting company trip leader, the put-in is like the most stressful part of the trip because you're often dealing with other rafting companies and real challenge, sometimes private boaters who are just on a totally different time frame, mindset. They're there to relax and have a good time, starting with, music and beers on the beach at 8 a.m. or whatever it is. And you're trying to get somewhere. You have a lot to do. And it's easy to be dismissive or even worse to people that you may feel like you're competing with, or that are at least in your way. They're in your way, keeping you from getting where you think you need to be. It's easy to look at those people with disdain or disparagement. And you may be right that they have no business being out there, or that they certainly look like the kind of bozos that you hope to get ahead of and stay ahead of so you don't have to rescue them later. But it's important to remember, just like that, there are those that may and those that will. What happens to that bozo today can happen to me tomorrow. You can't totally eliminate those types of situations. You may need help. Somebody may not rig for a flip. Those same people may have exactly what you need and be willing to share that with you. But more importantly, it's good to remember that they're human beings too, and they're actually out here for a lot of really good reasons. And the boating community, particularly back in those days in the 80s, pretty small. It's pretty rare to meet somebody that you didn't have a friend in common at least. Or you find out their name and say, oh, I've heard of you. So making friends at the put-in is a really important mindset, and it's really worth taking that little bit of extra time. It really only takes a few seconds a lot of the time to, rather than sort of shoulder past somebody or push ahead, to just stop and introduce yourself, say hi, where are you from? Make that little bit of connection, because let's face it, I mean, Colorado is still a pretty small state, you know. It's not a small thing, it's not an unusual thing to only have 1 or 2 degrees of separation. And you know, your whole pantheon of friends and relationships is composed of people that you met for the first time somewhere along the way. You didn't come into this world knowing anybody. So it's good to remember that and consider the value of the people that you meet. And then the third one, the third rule, it's really important. I call it focus on the pathways. Again, I've literally taught hundreds of people how to run whitewater. And on a river like the Arkansas, mentioned before, we don't have a whole lot of water over there. We have a lot of gradient. We have a lot of different sized rocks. We have a lot of constrained channels. There's a lot of whitewater. As far as I know, it's still the most popular whitewater river in the world. What makes running those rivers so fun is all the challenges, is all the risk, is all the obstacles, the hydraulic ones and the fixed hard ones. And when you're teaching people how to boat and they're trying to figure out which way to pull the oar or which way to draw the paddle, it's easy to get overwhelmed. And when people are looking downstream and trying to make the boat go where they want it to go and trying to figure out where they want it to go, it often gets really overwhelming, and space and time compress and everything comes faster and closer until it just looks like a nightmare. And that's when people start to freeze up and panic and get overwhelmed. And invariably when that happens and you pull over and say, okay, what's going on there? And the answer is always like, it's just so many obstacles, so many problems, so many things that can go wrong. And we always sit them down for a minute and say, listen, you're not looking at this right. Those obstacles are irrelevant. That is not what we're here to do or to deal with. We're here to focus on the pathways. And it's really remarkable, heartwarming thing to experience when you see someone, you can literally see it in their composure and in their actions when they have this paradigm shift, and all of a sudden they see the river in a different way. The obstacles do become irrelevant and they focus on where the water's going and where they want to go. When I'm teaching people, I always sit in the back of the boat, either behind the oarsman or next to the paddle guide, and every new view, I always say, what do you see? And if they start talking about rocks and holes and trees that are down, I punch them. Because you gotta like snap them out, right? It's like sensei, smack. And they're like, oh yeah, okay, right. And I say, it's like, I want to know, when I say, what do you see? I want to know where the pathway is. And there is always a pathway. And I want to know plan A. Where are we going? It's so important, so critical. And I think, and I'll kind of wrap this up with an interesting comparison. several years ago, I think right in this room, we had the first ever joint meeting of the CWCB Board and the Colorado Water Quality Control Commission. I was excited about this. I think I was the chairman that year, but I'm not sure. But I thought, wow, this is awesome, you know? And so I think our whole board came at it with this really, really positive mindset. And we were brainstorming and throwing out cool ideas. And the Water Quality Control Commission, and particularly sort of the staff there, they weren't interested in new ideas. They had a reason to kind of say, no, we can't really do that to everything we sort of threw out there and came up with. And I'm not saying this to badmouth them, because what dawned on me is they're a regulatory agency and a regulatory culture, and it's a totally different mindset. But this agency is really not about telling people what they can't do. It's about helping them do what they could do and helping our whole state move forward with water plan, with funding, with trying to come up with creative ways of helping people keep their farm in production, but also monetize some of the value of their water. I mean, we've heard just in the last 24 hours, we've heard a lot of really cool ideas. They're all focused on the pathways. They're all focused on moving the state forward. They're not focused on all the things that can go wrong and all the things we can crash into. So I guess in addition to the charge that I gave you about, you may well have to steward or help steward this agency through transition, you really need to keep focused on the pathways. They're there. Even in the worst case drought year we've experienced, growth comes from adversity most of the time. So let's embrace what we got and stay focused on that green stripe. It's going to take you through. And I love you all. It's just been awesome being with you. And thanks for putting up with my long-winded, frequent, unorganized basin director reports. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Felton. So are there any questions for Director Felton?
I'll just say that right there is why we're going to miss you, Greg Felt. Thank you so much again for all of your contributions. And I think you're right on about this agency, and we are a family, and I include the board in that. And I think the thing that makes this all work is that people want to be here. It's not for the pay. It's not for the accolades. It's because we all feel like we're doing the right thing, and you exemplify that. So thank you again.
Thank you. And with that, we are going to go on a break and return back at 10:15. Could we have everybody return back
Recording
to
in
their seats so
progress.
we can get started? Thank you, everyone. We are going to start back our meeting with number 19, informational update on the Colorado Water Plan progress.
Hi, everyone. Kat Weissmiller, CWCB staff for the record. This is agenda item 19, the Water Plan Progress Report. Today's item is part of an update that we've committed to doing on an annual basis to report back to the CWCB board on progress we've made on the actions within the 2023 Colorado Water Plan. As you probably recall, last year we delivered the 2-year progress report, which was a printed report that featured our progress to date and also highlighted a number of partner actions. This year's update will offer a glimpse of the water plan agency actions that have been completed and are ongoing, those that are advancing right now as priority actions, and others that have been kind of continually underway, which you may or may not have heard updates on over the last year. The Colorado Water Plan, as you'll recall, was released in 2023. It illuminates critical state water issues, helps set the stage for collaboration, resilience, and mitigating risk, and also highlights CWCB and other agency opportunities for leadership. It also effectively operates as a CWCB planning and strategy document. The Colorado Water Plan contains 50 agency actions for CWCB and collaborating agencies to address, as well as 50 partner actions, roughly 50 partner actions, that are examples of the good work we know that needs to happen across the state, across all of our water plan grant categories: watershed and recreation, engagement and innovation, storage and supply, conservation and land use, and agriculture. We carefully track how the water plan work is progressing within the water supply planning section. I shared this most recently at the Finance Committee meeting in September, so you may recall that we have sort of a point system of project advancement milestones that taken together give us a snapshot of our progress to date on the water plan work. Over the last recent months and years, the water supply planning section and the other sections across CWCB have been highly focused on water plan action advancement. So to date, within the 3 years of since its release, we have 44 agency actions that are underway or partially completed. 46 of our agency actions have secured funding. 40% have had workshops, stakeholder meetings, gathered data, or commissioned research. And as of January 2026, we're on track for 100% completion, with 32% of the water plan actions complete. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sam to talk a little bit more about the specifics of some of those actions.
Thank you, Kat. Sam Stein, CWCB staff for the record. Let's see if I can. Awesome. This one has a lot of movements on it. Okay, to date, we have officially moved forward 5 agency actions representing 10% of our total goal. These completed actions represent foundational work across all 4 action areas. For example, we successfully completed Action 1.7, the Transformative Landscape Change Report, which identifies sustainable turf replacement options. In the agricultural sector, we completed Action 2.6, assessing economic strategies to avoid buy and dry scenarios and protect irrigated lands. On the environmental side, we have finalized the Colorado River Health Assessment Framework, or CORAF, under Action 3.1, and the Wildfire Ready Watersheds Framework under Action 3.3. Finally, we've completed Action 4.5 by convening statewide workshops in Pueblo and Clifton to build local resilience across against climate vulnerability. Looking ahead to this fiscal year, our highest priority is centered around the governor's wildly important goals, or WIGs. We have targeted 4 specific milestones for completion by June 30th, 2026. These include Action 1.2, which focuses on enhancing municipal water efficiency reporting and data integration guidelines for water providers. We are also prioritizing action at 2.4 to streamline cooperative water sharing guidance across DWR, CWCB, and CDA to make these agreements easier for stakeholders to navigate. Under action 3.4, we are developing a scenario planning methodology for forest health to inform the technical update and guided by a technical advisory group. Finally, for action 4.1, we are partnering with CSU Water Center to pilot beta version of the capacity building hub to provide a centralized water education and career resources statewide. Beyond our immediate WIGs, several long-term multi-year efforts are currently making meaningful progress. We are making headway on actions 5.1 and 5.2, having recently selected and contracted Brown and Caldwell to lead the analysis and technical update and to support development of the basin implementation plans. Our Water Secure Communities program, part of Action 410, is also moving forward with the advisory committee having their second meeting later this week. We have also made significant progress on several other actions that are currently ongoing across our section. Some examples include expanding interagency coordination under Action 1.4, where resources will be housed within the recently launched Water Funding Explorer interactive tool to help stakeholders find conservation and infrastructure funding. We are also advancing statewide storage analysis through case studies for Action 1.9 in coordination with our consultant team at Jacobs. And additionally, staff are working with CSU and Western Water Assessment to finalize a climate impacts report under Action 4.8 to strengthen our climate adaptation decision support tools. Finally, we have several new efforts just getting underway that will shape our section's work for the next few years. The RFP submissions deadline for Action 1.8, the statewide spatial landscape feasibility assessment, has recently closed, and we're moving into contractor selection right now. We are also preparing to launch Action 4.3, a dedicated Colorado Water Plan messaging campaign, and Action 4.9, which will create a new innovation challenge for the water sector. Moving forward, these actions demonstrates our firm commitment to moving from planning to implementation. In summary, we remain on track for 100% completion by 2033, with 44 actions currently underway. As of January 2026, we have achieved 32% total water completion, representing a steady increase in progress year over year since the plan's release. This update demonstrates that the 2023 Colorado Water Plan is a living document being actively implemented by CWCB and our collaborating agencies. Staff will continue to provide these updates annually, and we're happy to take any questions you might have on any specific actions or our overall trajectory. Thank you very much.
Okay, so are there any questions? Director Vasquez?
Yeah, going back to 2.6, the strategies to avoid by and dry. Does that include anything about the ag power we heard about yesterday? 2.6.
Yeah, 2.6 does not. That was a report that we released, the 10 strategies to protect irrigated agriculture. So that was it does not have anything to do with that.
Okay.
That's a separate effort.
And then if you could flip forward one or two, next one. Yeah, the 1.9 for new and existing water storage opportunities. That's statewide?
Yeah, that's statewide.
Mm-hmm. And is it looking mostly at off channel or any storage?
So this is one that is still in the process of developing exactly what it is. Right now, we're currently looking at case studies around the state and haven't quite solidified exactly what direction we're going in terms of which exact storage opportunities. We're still scoping that out a little bit right now.
Yeah, so are you mining the BIPs for
Yeah,
that
that's
information?
Where, the BIPs and
Thank you.
index database.
Okay, all right, Dr. Wind.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Likely one of the challenges of a water plan or any kind of a plan is we all kind of read it and look to different metrics that help satisfy our own goals.
Sure.
Of the kind of sub metrics I'll call them, that you mentioned, how many relate to kind of closing the gap? You know, it's something, of course, you'd expect me to think about often, of recognizing in most basins we have that gap between supply and demand. Looking down the road, could you comment on, I recognize that not all of them will feed into that, but maybe just react to that question. And it, you know, what will future water plans make a recognition that maybe we can't close that gap? And then what does that mean?
Yeah, Director Nguyen, that's a great question. I don't know that I have a number off the top of my head. I think that obviously we have our 4 action areas, and I think that in a way we're looking to close the gap in kind of all of them through our communities, through the environment, through ag. I don't know if you have a specific number that you think would be, that said, I'm happy to kind of look through and go through and find any specifics for you, but I think I would say in a way, all of them work towards closing the gap, whether that's, you know, conservation or additional storage or ag, but I'll let Kat elaborate.
One thing that I also want to make mention of is that though we definitely show a gap, one thing that we tried to do in the last water plan was to start to reframe the conversation around mitigating risk as opposed to closing the gap. You make a good point that the gap is a challenge, certainly, and looking ahead at the uncertainty in our climate projections, demographics, you know, the concept of closing the gap is certainly something that we all find challenging. And hence we've been trying to reframe it around risk more than closing the gap specifically.
Okay, are there any more questions? Director Combs?
Something's needling in my mind, sorry. When we're talking about changing the conversation from the gap to mitigating the risk, give me a better explanation.
I always get nervous when you ask a question.
I'm so sorry. I'm wanting to understand the shift, because it seems to me, and I'm not trying to put words in Director Nguyen's, the gap is the reality of what we see statistically, right? Data driven, we see. And so then help me understand why it's different than if we're going to say we're just looking at mitigating the risk rather than addressing specifically the gap as the mitigation. Are we just changing terminology? But that's what I'm saying is, like, you got to help me understand that cleaner.
Sure. I think that there's a couple different components of it. You know, I think the scope of the work that we do within the water plan has expanded from the 2015 water plan to the 2023 water plan, for one thing. So we're considering things that may not have been, you know, specific to the gap. So across all of our 50 actions, not all of those actions specifically close the gap, but they may mitigate risk in other ways. Education, for example, is one of those things that I think helps us to mitigate risk, because awareness is certainly important to helping people use water in a smarter way. Does it close the gap quantitatively? You know, we don't have a very good way of showing that. So you're right. It's a bit of, it's a nuanced point, certainly, but I think that's why we're talking about it in a different way in terms of mitigating risk, because the actions that we've included in the water plan go beyond just supply and demand to broaden the things that we're thinking about.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and move on to item 20, operational planning update.
Good morning, Anna Moss, CWCB Deputy Director. Thanks for your time this morning. So this is a bit of a recap for you. I feel like between staff presentations and director's reports yesterday, most of what I have to share today is old news at this point in the meeting, but still excited to share some highlights with you. So by way of background, in 2023, we worked with the board on some operational planning, and most of you, I think, were part of that exercise. Through that, we worked on a process to really identify the board's wants and needs so that you all could be effective in achieving your mission. One of the things that came out of that exercise was both the CWCB guide and an annual calendar. And in that calendar, we committed to coming back every January and updating you on the DNR performance plan, what we achieved in the past year, what we're looking forward to in the current fiscal year as far as goals, and then also a highlight reel of what got reported out at our SMART Act hearing, which was just last week, actually, which was referenced a few times. That was led by Director Gibbs last week. And so the SMART Act really highlights the department as a whole, the legislative agenda items, our goals, every single division. So it's just a highlight reel of what the DNR gets to do. So today I'm going to focus really on the CWCB's portion of the SMART Act, and then a few things out of our performance plan for your awareness. So again, this was last week. We were able to highlight you all and what you do, and a few things from last year. We highlighted the fact that the Water Plan Grant Program was very successful. In the past year, you awarded 78 grants totaling over $16 million. And in the current fiscal year, we're seeing record demands. So great opportunities for us to advance a lot of projects. We also highlighted the action you took in November with the Shoshone water rights decision, which was a big moment for this board for sure. The SMART Act also covers the department's wildly important goals. And so I won't really go into this in a whole lot of detail because Kat covered the work that we're doing on the water plan, but every year within the performance plan, we do have our CWCB is always tied to the water plan, since that's really our long range plan anyway. So we are strategic about what we're going to achieve in the next year and then report that out to the governor's office. On the legislative budget and regulatory agenda side of things, Lauren talked through this yesterday. We do have a staffing request to add additional staff to our grant team. This is really as a result of Proposition JJ, which removed the Tabor cap on sports betting, and then House Bill 251311 eliminated certain sports betting tax deductions. So the combination of those two things means more revenue for more projects, which is great, which also requires more staff to do outreach, grant processing, accounting, all the parts and pieces that are required to administer a grant program. So we'll keep you posted on that as we work through this session. On the budget side of things, the governor's budget included a balancing proposal to transfer severance tax cash funds to the general fund over the current fiscal year and next fiscal year. It's just a really challenging state budget environment. This is not a surprise to anybody. So the direct impact to the CWCB is $6.6 million. It is $4.1 million out of perpetual base fund this current fiscal year and 2.5 out of the perpetual base fund next fiscal year. And we'll manage that. We'll work with the board, certainly as Kirk presents the available cash before each board meeting, and then at our September Finance Committee, when he goes through the fund availability and what's out there for project spill grants, non-reimbursable investments and loans. So we'll manage that within our cash flow. On the statutory regulatory side of things, you all did a great job last year. Going to all of your public meetings, that was a new requirement that you all attend 2 meetings within your basins. So thank you for achieving that. We had to report that to the General Assembly at the SMART Act hearing. And a friendly reminder, keep up that this year. Jeff will be tracking that, or I guess his whoever backfills that position. So let us know if you need support in that space, but we're happy to report that that was a success. Other updates, I won't go into any detail here because thanks to Chris Sturm, he did a great update for you yesterday, but we also were able to highlight for the General Assembly the hard work that Chris and his team have done on the wildfire ready watersheds front. Pivoting a little bit to what's in our actual performance plan itself. I won't read through all of these, but I have a number of slides that really just highlight all of the work that this agency did last fiscal year. We have a really strong team at the CWCB. Staff are always busy. You know this. You see us every other month, but in between those meetings, a lot of activity happens. So in the last year, you all approved $67 million in loans, $37 million for grants. We published the Water Plan Progress Report. There was significant work around turf replacement, The CWCB guide was published. We just mentioned this one, the 10 strategies to protect irrigated agriculture was published. Multiple climate and our water and climate workshops were hosted. There was significant work done related to municipal water efficiency. There was 13 new in-stream flow appropriations. Let's see, continued work on LiDAR acquisition across the state. Significant work on recovery programs. There was work on, as you know, Colorado River. That is a constant update for this board at every board meeting. We utilized ARPA funds to retire acreage in both the Republican and Rio Grande River basins to conserve groundwater. So a lot of things happened behind the scenes that we were able to highlight in our performance plan. Also in the performance plan, we have our wildly important goals. So again, Kat kind of went over what we're doing on the water plan side of things already. So we track this usually quarterly with the governor's office. So that's our first goal, is advancing the agency actions of things that we control. The second goal that we have in the performance plan is advancing partner actions. And this is what we do through our loans and grants. And so what we measure and report out is that we're utilizing the grant dollars that we have to the best of our ability, and also the outreach efforts that we do. And I'll just mention that in the written director's report every other month, Janine provides a great update for the grants team as to those outreach efforts. So if you ever have questions on the status of those, they're always written in there too. And then just a reminder of this process, how it works every year as far as the performance plan itself goes. And you're certainly welcome to give me feedback if you think that we should be looking at things differently. But about this time of year, we start working with the executive director's office at the DNR to do a little bit of a look forward. What do we want to achieve in the next year? Again, since we have the water plan, that really kind of drives our conversations, which is nice for us that we have this big strategy document in front of us already. We finalize those goals usually May, June-ish with the governor's office. Performance plans are finalized right around the end of the fiscal year. And then those are due to the General Assembly in the fall, and then we do the SMART Act hearing in January. So that's kind of the overview of what that cadence looks like for us. So that was the update I had for you. But if you've got any questions, certainly happy to answer any if I have the answers.
Are there any questions? Hearing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next we will move on to item 20, in-stream flow appropriations.
Good morning, everyone. Brandy Logan, CWCB staff, presenting agenda item 21. We have 3 new appropriation related items today. I'm going to start us off with the 2026 requests for in-stream flow water rights and water divisions 1, 2, 6, and 7, and then Rob Beal is going to follow up with the next 2 items. So I just want to do a brief overview for some context of the in-stream flow program. So back in the 1970s, during a lot of the environmental movement, there was increasing public concern about dry stream reaches. And at that time, there was no legal way to protect water in a river, including any of the federal bypass flows. In addition, there was the threat of a ballot initiative to allow private in-stream flows, and there was a lot of concern from the water community about having private citizens applying for environmental water rights all over the state. So concerns about these issues led to the creation of in-stream flow and natural lake level water rights in 1973. These are held exclusively by the CWCB, and you all have the authority to appropriate these water rights. They protect minimum flows and lake levels to preserve the natural environment to a reasonable degree. And importantly, they're administered in the state's prior appropriation system. This system or this program kind of solved 2 issues. It provides that means of environmental protection, and it provides regulatory certainty for water users, as well as an agency-led process to kind of manage this system. And this, just a quick reminder of the in-stream flow process, which is designed to be very transparent with a lot of public engagement built in. Each of the recommended reaches takes a minimum of 3 years. The first year is generally recommendation development, and that is done by our recommending entities and partners. The second year is staff evaluation, and that starts off at the January, which in this year will be February 11th workshop. And that really kicks off this big staff analysis and public outreach phase. And then when the recommendation is ready, we bring that to you all for a board decision. And so that's where we are today, asking you to form your intent to appropriate on 8 in-stream flow water rights. And this is really the start of a 3 board meeting process. So we will be back in March for public comment, and then again in May to request final action if they're uncontested. Notices to contest will be in end of March, and that would put us on track for a hearing in September if that occurs. And so you as a board makes 3 required statutory findings in order to appropriate in-stream flow water rights. These are, first, that a natural environment exists, and I'm going to provide some examples. Second, the natural environment will be preserved by the water available for the appropriation. So that really has 2 pieces. How much water does the natural environment need, and how much water is there? And then the second, or the last, is no material injury to water rights. And so because these water rights work within the prior appropriation system, they can't injure existing water rights. And there's that added protection, the provision of 1023B, that also recognizes undecreed uses at the time of the appropriation. So you as a board have wide latitude to determine what aspects of the natural environment are going to be protected. We have in-stream flows based on riparian communities, macroinvertebrates, sport fisheries, native fish, endangered fish, even some birds in the case of hanging lakes. And so the recommending entity is really the entity that's responsible for collecting information about the natural environment, and they also work to determine the biological flow needs. So R2Cross is the primary method that we use to evaluate flow needs. This is based on surveying a riffle transect. So riffles are the shallowest area in a channel that would dry up first if the flows became very low. They're also really important areas for primary production, macroinvertebrate habitat, spawning, as well as, of course, habitat connectivity so that the fish can migrate upstream and downstream. So this survey information is used to model habitat criteria at different flow rates, and we're looking at average depth, wetted perimeter, and average velocity. And you can see from this criteria table that as the bankful width of the channel increases, the depth that is protected also increases. So these minimum flows scale with the size of the stream. So in general, the flow that meets 2 of the 3 hydraulic criteria is used as the basis for the winter flow rates. And the one that meets 3 of 3 is considered necessary to adequately protect habitat during the summer growing season. And I just wanted to go through a few pretty pictures from the state. Staff's role is to assist in data collection. That means we can help our recommenders with R2Cross. We also make flow measurements, including installing and maintaining temporary gauges if needed. And we do site visits to the recommended reaches. And so this is a really, I think, a favorite part of our job. We get to travel across the state and see some really beautiful places. Here on the left, we have our former AmeriCorps volunteer, Shiv Patel, out in the field. We had 2 AmeriCorps volunteers last year, and we'll have another 2 this year, which was very helpful for us collecting additional data and getting out, as well as processing that information. We also have our field hydrographer, Laura Corona, on the left, and then a number of CPW staff on this picture on the right, which I love. You can see that's a very rainy day. I think they spent the day in a downpour, and they are still having a great time. So any day in the field is usually better than any day behind a monitor. That's not always true, but usually. And then this last picture or set of pictures is from a number of recommendations in the north that I'll be talking about in a minute. These recommendations sometimes take many more than 3 years to develop. This is pictures back from 2018. We've had a number of staff changes in that time, including Rob Veal becoming the chief of this section, but you can see that he already looks like he's taking charge in this picture. A little less scenic, but also important, is the analysis that we do behind the scenes to evaluate these streams and recommendations. We evaluate all of the data that's submitted by the recommending entities, looking at R2Cross, the natural environment. We also conduct those hydrologic assessments. So this is where we're looking at how much water is available for the appropriation. This includes mapping the reaches, evaluating water rights and diversion records, looking at available gauge data, flow measurements, and talking with water commissioners to understand the system. We also do quite a bit of outreach to keep people informed about potential in-stream flows. This process starts with that workshop that'll be in February this year. And we also offer presentations to boards of county commissioners and counties that have potential in-stream flows moving forward. In addition to that, we publish newspaper notices. This is well ahead of any kind of legal notice in water court. And we send letters to landowners adjacent to recommended reaches, as well as notices to the subscription mailing list, which is required by the rules. So when we've got all of this data collected, reviewed, analyzed, and outreach has been completed, we at this point have 8 streams that we believe are ready to move forward. We have 1 recommendation in Division 1, that's the East Fork Roaring Creek, 1 down in Division 2 on Cottonwood Creek, 5 recommended reaches up in Division 6. This is all in the headwaters of the North Fork White River below Trapper Lake. And then lastly, we have Pando Creek down in Division 7. So I'm going to briefly go through each of these recommendations individually. You have a lot more detailed information in the packet, the memo, the executive summaries, the recommending letter, and supporting data for each of these. And I will say, just to kind of streamline things here, that each of these recommendations are headwater streams. So they're all starting in the headwaters. And they are also all CPW recommendations this year. We don't have any recommendations from BLM or other entities. So I'm going to start us with Division 1, the East Roaring Fork Creek. This is a very steep course-bedded stream located about 30 miles west from Fort Collins in Larimer County. This recommendation is from the headwaters to the confluence with Roaring Creek, which is a tributary to the Poudre River. And for each of the recommendations, the recommended flow rates are going to be in the bottom right-hand side of the slide. I'm not going to read those in the interest of time and maybe our sanity. So portions of East Roaring Fork Creek watershed were impacted by the Cameron Peak wildfire in 2020, and you can see evidence of that in some of these pictures here. Fortunately, much of the stream corridor was not burned, and the system is actively recovering. CPW has stocked greenback cutthroat trout in this creek for the past 3 years. These are a subspecies of trout native to the South Platte River Basin. These fish are federally threatened, state threatened, and considered a species of greatest conservation need in CPW's State Wildlife Action Plan. And CPW has observed survival of these stocked fish, indicating that they can overwinter, and the stocked fish in the area are aimed at restoring the fish to some of their native range as part of overall conservation strategies. So we'll see how this works. I did get some pictures just yesterday of some of the stocking efforts from 2025, and I think I might need some help playing the video. Yeah, hopefully it won't blast us with loud sound. And so you can just see this plastic bag releasing the fish right into the river. And based on the number of pictures on the people in this picture, I think it's a big effort to do these stocking efforts. All right, so here we're going to move to Division 2 and Cottonwood Creek. This is in Custer County, 7 miles southwest from Westcliff. The headwaters originate in the San de Cristo Mountains, and the recommended reach extends 4.1 miles to the U.S. Forest Service boundary. So here, CPW is working to establish the Hayden Creek cutthroat trout. Hayden Creek trout are a unique lineage of cutthroat trout that have genetic markers which date back to early samples collected in the Arkansas Basin. So the believed to be extinct yellowfin cutthroat trout were the native trout in the Arkansas Basin. And so these fish are the closest analog to that native trout in the basin. And so as part of the recovery strategy, CPW has stocked these trout into Cottonwood Creek for 3 years, starting in 2019. They've observed good survival, indicating favorable habitat conditions for a self-sustaining population. And I just wanted to put up this picture. This is a photo of one of 7 specimens of those yellowfin cutthroat trout. These were collected in the Twin Lakes area in 1889. This is part of the Smithsonian collection. These were rumored to be very large trout, up to 10 pounds in weight. I don't know if that's a fish story or not. And they were last seen in 1902, so been a little while. All right, so now we're going to be moving to Division 6. We have 5 recommended reaches here in the headwaters of the North Fork White River. Each of these are in Garfield County, and each of these are from the headwaters down to the confluence with the North Fork White River. Here on Bear Creek, we have a recommendation to protect a 3.1 mile reach of stream. This is a high gradient stream with very complex habitat. CPW sampling indicates the stream has a brook trout fishery as well as mayflies and caddisflies. Big Fish Creek is the largest of the proposed streams in this area with a larger basin, generally more flow. This 4.3 mile reach supports brook trout, rainbow cutthroat hybrids, and Colorado sculpin. CPW biologists noted large bodied fish in this reach above 12 inches and a high density of fish with excellent habitat. Moving to Hoskins, we have a small 2.1 mile tributary. This supports a brook trout fishery as well as native Colorado cutthroat trout. Colorado cutthroat trout are listed as a Tier 1 species of greatest conservation need by CPW. Moving to Lynx Creek, we have another small tributary to the North Fork White. The proposed reach is 1.6 miles, and this supports another cutthroat trout fishery. This reach is entirely on U.S. Forest Service lands and has just a small spring, so that might help contribute to why we still have these fish in Lynx Creek in a only native population. And lastly, we have Picket Pin. This is proposed reach is 2.7 miles, and this small stream supports a brook trout fishery. All right. Last of all, we have a recommendation for Pando Creek. This is a tributary to Cascade Creek, which is a tributary to the Animas River. This recommendation protects 1.9 miles from the headwaters to the confluence with Cascade Creek. This is all north of Purgatory Ski Area. This stream is described as extremely high gradient with excellent step pool habitat. There's also a large number of full and partial fish barriers, both along Cascade Creek and Pando Creek, which made it a candidate to re-establish populations of the San Juan lineage cutthroat trout. This species of trout was thought to be extinct until a few small populations were found based on DNA comparisons to those museum samples. So those museum samples from the 1800s have been really helpful to helping rediscover some of these fish and these remnant populations. So CPW stocked these fish from 3 years, from 2021 to 2024, with the goal of establishing a core conservation population. And then I'm just going to do the brief overview of the procedure timeline. This has some dates on it that you saw kind of earlier in the schedule. So we'll be back again in March, May, hopefully not September for a hearing. And then this is just the summary table of the recommended reach. You also have this table in your board packet. And I'll just quickly read the recommendation for the record. Staff recommends that pursuant to in-stream flow Rule 5D, the board declares its intent to appropriate in-stream flow water rates on each of the stream segments listed in Table 1 and directs staff to publicly notice the board's declaration of its intent to appropriate. And so with that, I can take questions, or Viola, I don't know if we have anyone that wanted to make public comment.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay, so you have the staff recommendation before you.
I'll move staff recommendation.
Thank you, Director Hawes.
I'll second.
Thank you, Director Vasquez. So we have is there any discussion? Director Felton?
Just a question on the Cottonwood Creek one. You said it starts in the headwaters and it ends at the forest boundary. Are there any diversion structures up in the forest above that boundary?
There are not.
Okay,
It's above all head gates.
thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So for the record, Rob Veal, CWCB staff, this is agenda item number 21B, final action on uncontested appropriations on Vermilion Creek and Water Division 6. Before we get started, I want to thank Brandy for searching the archives to prove that I've actually been out in the field before. They talk about this greatness of going out in the field. I don't typically go out anymore, so, you know, I'll take their word for it. Anyway, back to Vermilion Creek. As indicated by the agenda item, this is an action item. So Vermilion Creek is located in the far northwest part of the state in Moffat County. The stream originates in Wyoming and it flows south and west until it reaches the confluence with the Green River in Browns Park. Today, as Brandy mentioned in the previous agenda item, staff is requesting the board to make 3 determinations required by statute. 1, a natural environment exists. 2, the natural environment will be preserved by the water available for appropriation. And 3rd, no material injury will occur to other water rights. The information necessary to support these determinations is contained in staff's memo for this agenda item, the recommendation letters and documentation submitted by the Bureau of Land Management, and in staff's memo and oral presentation provided at the March 2025 board meeting. So currently Reach 1 starts at a point approximately 1.8 miles upstream of the historic USGS gauge at Ink Springs Ranch. Fishery surveys in this reach indicate a self-sustaining population of native mountain suckers, which are identified by Colorado Parks and Wildlife as a state species of greatest conservation need and a state species of special concern. Reach 2 starts at the lower terminus of Reach 1 and goes downstream to the Vermilion Ditch Headgate. Fishery surveys here indicate a self-sustaining population of sculpins, speckled dace, and mountain suckers. So these appropriations were publicly noticed and no parties filed to contest these appropriations. And even though these appropriations were formally uncontested, a landowner did contact the BLM with concerns about these recommendations. As part of their discussion, 2 modifications to the original recommendations were made. The first is to move the upper terminus of Reach 1 downstream to the point I mentioned, 1.8 miles upstream of the lower terminus. The second modification is to seek an appropriation date as the date of filing the water court application, which would occur no sooner than December 1st of 2026 and no later than December 31st of 2026. This is being done to allow stakeholders more time to compile information related to current operations that can be recognized in the CWCB's application as part of 1023B. So this table below indicates the 2 reaches, which is copied directly from the staff's memo. With that, I have staff's recommendation. It is shown here on the slide. I don't think I need to read it, but it's exactly as it was in the memo, and I can take any questions that you may have.
Okay. Are there any questions? Director Haas?
Yes, thank you, Rob. So looking at the staff memo, it says you're shortening the upper Vermilion Creek reach from a total of 18 miles to 1.8. That's a big difference. I'm just curious, are we still going to be able to protect the environmental values in this stretch with this change? And are there any other things we're doing to maybe help with that?
Yes, the short answer is yes. There's some springs located 1.8 miles up. While staff was confident that the water availability showed water all the way up, the landowner up there was concerned that there could possibly be dry reaches within that area that would cause administrative problems. So he had discussions with the BLM, and the BLM decided that this would still meet their statutory requirements of protecting what they need to protect. Roy Smith from the BLM is here. Roy, if you want to provide any additional comments on the discussions, but.
For the record, Roy Smith, I'm the statewide water rights and in-stream flow coordinator for the Bureau of Land Management. And I can testify, Rob is not an office-bound bureaucrat. I've been in the field with him many times. The reason that we decided to shorten the reach is with discussions with T. Wright Dickinson, a major land and water right owner in the area. And our water availability analysis was based on a gauge at the bottom of the reach. There were no gauges above that. And much of the flow in the reach is provided by springs that emerge from the base of canyon walls in the bottom of the reach. And T. Wright observed that the flows in the upper part of the reach are highly variable, which we agree with. And what happens is when flow is present, fish migrate up from the canyon and they occupy, throughout the reach. But when it gets really dry, and just like last year, we had an extreme flash drought in Northwest Colorado, the creek in that portion went totally dry. So of course it couldn't support fish. So T. Wright said, he was concerned about that. So BLM agreed to modify the reach to just that perennial reach in the canyon. But we will note that if the board proceeds with this appropriation, there will still be a priority date associated with the in-stream flow water right, and it will have the ability to issue a call upstream. So, and there are no water rights in the reach upstream of that canyon. So it should be able to protect flows from, new appropriations that occur further up in the watershed. So I hope that that answers your question, but this is a really important recommendation to BLM. Vermilion Creek is a huge watershed. This is the only perennial stream literally within hundreds and hundreds of square miles. And we're fortunate that it supports only native fish, which is another reason to protect that creek. And BLM's motivated and what's driven this recommendation is that at base flows, if there were just one more major appropriation on this creek, it may diminish the ability of this creek to even support fish at all. So that's why we brought this recommendation forward. And we hope by, working with T. Wright and other water users in the area that we've modified the recommendation sufficiently that they're comfortable with it.
Are there any other questions? Director Camlin?
Rob, you and I have talked about this quite a bit, and I appreciate your ability to work with T. Wright and get this done. I've talked to T. Wright several times on this. Right when you guys first brought it to, I think it was our county board, and discussed that or whatever, and what T. Wright was telling them guys was correct. I mean, he's been on that stream all his life or whatever, and so I've had a lot of conversations. I've been watching this one, so just kudos to you guys to be able to sit down and listen to him and make a logical choice on this. There's a win-win situation here. So thank you.
Are there any other more questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. So you do have staff recommendation before you. What would this board like to do?
I recommend we approve 21B.
Thank you, Vice Chair Vasquez. Do I hear a second? Thank you, Director Camlin. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, once again, Rob Veal, CWCB staff, this is agenda item 21C. Final action on the contested in-stream flow appropriation on Mill Creek and Water Division 6. As indicated by the agenda title, this is an action item. So Mill Creek is the largest tributary to the Yampa River between the Williams Fork and the Little Snake Rivers. Mill Creek originates near the Sleepy Cat Peak and flows northwest until it reaches the confluence with the Yampa River. The proposed ISF reach comes from Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the Bureau of Land Management and extends from the confluence with Wilson Creek downstream to the Yampa River for a total of 4.1 miles. Once again, staff is requesting the board make the three determinations required by statute. 1, that a natural environment exists. 2, that the natural environment will be preserved by the water available for appropriation. And 3, that it causes no injury to other water rights. The information necessary to support these determinations is contained in staff's memo for this agenda item, and the recommendation letters and documentation submitted by Colorado Parks and Wildlife and BLM, and in staff's memo and oral presentation provided at the March 2025 board meeting. So BLM and CPW are interested in protecting Mill Creek because it provides spawning and rearing habitat for flathead sucker, bluehead sucker, and round-tailed chub, collectively known as the 3 species. The 3 species are large body native fishes endemic to rivers and streams on western Colorado. And the 3 species are exhibiting a downward trend and collectively occupy less than half of their native range in the Colorado River Basin. The importance of this reach of Mill Creek for native fishes led to the cooperation between BLM and CPW to document the use of the native species, implement fish stocking programs, and complete cooperative studies to determine the flow rates needed to support the natural environment. So CPW, along with BLM and other federal agencies, along with other state agencies, are signatories to a range-wide conservation agreement and conservation strategy for the 3 species. The goal of the conservation strategy is to ensure the persistence of the population of the 3 species throughout their respective ranges. CPW and BLM seek to reduce the imperiled status of these species across their historic range in Colorado in order to protect the species and reduce the risk of being listed under the Endangered Species Act. CPW and BLM have dedicated significant resources to bolstering these populations through non-native fish control, reservoir screening projects, research on movement patterns and spawning behavior in tributaries like Mill Creek. From 2015 to 2024, CPW has proactively stocked over 20,000 bluehead sucker and over 3,500 flannelmouth sucker in Mill Creek to bolster populations in both Mill Creek and the Yampa River. Because of the importance of the fishery in Mill Creek, the BLM and CPW decided to use a flow quantification methodology that is species specific and can be tailored to assess flows and habitat relationships specific to flannelmouth sucker and bluehead suckers. So BLM and CPW decided to use the in-stream flow incremental methodology, the IFIM, using System for Environmental Flow Analysis, SEFA. Don't worry, there won't be a quiz on these, but a widely accepted method for quantifying suitable hydraulic habitat as a function of discharge for specific species and life stages. So the SEFA software is a modern version of the physical habitat simulation software. So if you've ever heard of PHAB Sim, this program was historically used for Colorado's in-stream flow program for IFIM framework, but that's an old relegated software, and so SEFA has taken its place. So as part of staff's data collection efforts, we installed a temporary gauge that collected streamflow data for 8 years. As part of our gauge installation process, we also installed a game camera, and I couldn't resist not showing these slides again. I think this is my favorite picture here that we've ever had from the game cameras. Yeah, the animals is basically like, here's my close-up. But it just shows that there's a variety of wildlife that use Mill Creek besides the 3 species that we're looking to have protected by the flow rates. So this ISF appropriation was brought to the board in March of 2025. Colorado Coal Company filed a notice to contest this matter, and subsequently Western Resource Advocates filed for party status, and Carroll Davidson Partnership and Mill Creek Ranch LLC filed for hearing participant status. Per the ISF rules, the recommending entities, CPW and BLM, were automatically granted party status in this matter. And at the July board meeting, First Assistant Attorney General Jennifer Mealy was designated as the hearing officer and set the hearing date to be held in conjunction with the November 2025 CWCB meeting. The parties spent significant time working on a way to move this appropriation forward without the need for an administrative hearing. And as such, the hearing date has been postponed twice. And if the board takes final action on this matter today as proposed in staff's recommendation, no hearing will be necessary. So Colorado has historically mined coal in the Mill Creek Basin as shown in this map. The Colorado property boundary is shown in black. As you can see, also the reach of the Mill Creek BLM and CPW recommendation is also down below that area. Colorado's primary concern with the appropriation of the Mill Creek in-stream flow water right is that it may interfere with water rights they will need to get later to treat springs that may emerge during or after their mine reclamation process. And these springs may require treatment to meet discharge standards to comply with existing permits from Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment and Division of Mine Safety. Colorado anticipates that these springs are likely to emerge within or adjacent to its mining operations within the Mill Creek Basin within a few years to decades, but the exact timing, location, and amount of water needed for treatment is unknown at this time. Future administration of the Mill Creek ISF appropriation could necessitate the need for local replacement sources to treat these springs. The parties in this case all believe it is in their best interest to avoid the need to develop the water rights associated with the Milk Creek Reservoir, which is for 78,000 acre feet solely to augment to the in-stream flow. So Cal Wyo and CWCB staff have been meeting on a weekly basis for the better part of 6 months to develop an agreement to allow for treatment of the emergent springs and still allowing for the appropriation of ISF water right on Milk Creek. This agreement functions as a partnership between CWCB and Cal Wyo, and all the other parties and participants in this matter reviewed and consented to the ISF agreement, even though they will not be signatories to it. There are 4 main parts of the agreement, and I'm going to go over them briefly. First, the CWCB agrees to subordinate the Milk Creek ISF to any depletions related to treatment of any emergent spring arising with or adjacent to Cal Wyo's operation within 20 years as of the date of the agreement. This will result in a general subordination of the CWCB ISF right to other water rights in the basin as well. However, if an administered CWCB call will not result in curtailment of the treatment of any adjudicated emergent springs arising during this 20-year period, CWCB may place its call under the adjudicated Milk Creek ISF date. The second provision is that the CWCB will file in water court an application for in-stream flow water rights on Milk Creek. CWCB and Cal Wyo will enter into a stipulation which incorporates the terms and conditions of the settlement agreement and include that as an attachment in the water court case. The CWCB will get an adjudicated date in water court in 2026 and establish an appropriation date of March 19th of 2025. Cal Wyo also agrees to lease water rights associated with the Milk Creek #1 ditch to the CWCB for a period of 20 years to be used for in-stream flow purposes within the in-stream flow reach identified for the Milk Creek ISF. These water rights were recently quantified in case number 18 CW 3058, and a summary of the water rights are located in the table below. It's staff's intention to bring this acquisition to the board later this year for consideration if the Milk Creek ISF and associated agreement are approved. And one of the final main provisions is the preferential right after the conclusion of the lease and upon notice from Cal Wyo to CWCB that Cal Wyo is selling the Milk Creek ditch #1 water rights to allow the CWCB to bargain for the purchase of those rights. There is no requirement for the CWCB to purchase these water rights or for Cal Wyo to sell these water rights, but it provides an option in the future if they decide to sell those. So before I provide staff recommendation in this matter, I'd like to extend my appreciation to staff and legal representation from Cal Wyo, who have worked very diligently to reach an agreement in this matter that I think we could both be proud of, and also the Attorney General's Office of Christopher Davis. And with that, I can provide staff's recommendation. And I can try to answer any questions, but before I do that, there's also representatives from Cal Wyo and the BLM that would like to address the board as well. So I guess first we could have Cal Wyo come up and speak.
Thank you, Mr. Beal, for laying out some of the history and the agreement we've come to so comprehensively. I think it's really important to understand how we got here. My name is Aaron Ladd, an attorney with Dickinson Wright, here today representing the Cal Wyo mine. Cal Wyo had significant concerns of the impact that a senior year-round in-stream flow on Milk Creek would have on its operations and its ability to comply with its discharge permit obligations, its mining permit obligations, as it moves into this new phase of reclaiming its open surface mines upstream of the proposed Milk Creek ISF. Cal Wyo brought these concerns to CWCB staff, and as Rob mentioned, we met nearly every week for the better part of 6 months, trying to figure out what the common ground solution is here. And the result of all of that effort has been the settlement concept before you today. And I can assure you, I think every word and every paragraph of that has been the subject of an hour call. Cal Wyo, I think, believes that the end result is a meaningful partnership between Cal Wyo and the CWCB here that meets each of CWCB and Cal Wyo's goals gives us what we need, but ultimately protects the natural environment of Mill Creek to a reasonable degree. And I'd like you to know, there were times where it didn't look like this was going to come together. We had a number of false starts where settlement concepts never got off the ground for one reason or another. So we've really left no stone unturned, coming to this workable result here. Again, many thanks to Rob and the AG staff and all of the CWCB staff who participated in this, and it was really a hard negotiated agreement to get here where we are. And I think the end result is that Colawio is proud of where we got to. And I think this really exemplifies the best of what's possible when parties with ostensibly competing interests and needs can come together and really find that common ground. So Colawio's here, happy to answer any questions you have about how we got where we got, or why it makes sense, and respectfully ask that the CWCB board approve the settlement agreement as proposed today. Thank you.
We have one question for you by Director Vasquez.
Yes, I'm curious, can you elaborate on the schedule or time frame you anticipate the recovery to take?
Yeah, so Colawio, the mines are moving into reclamation phases now. In fact, it's ongoing. The first stage of that is really earthwork, putting back. These are open pit surface coal mines that have been operating to support energy generation at Craig Station locally. The very first step is sort of putting the earth back and regrading. And it's not until that step is complete that water that may be moving through the geology might present in a new place and result in the springs that are a concern here. And we think that that work would occur over the coming 5 years. And then there's another delay in experience in other reclamation contexts for these similar coal mines, where then it may take some number of years following that for the water to find its new pathways through, and may result in these springs that would then require treatment. And so that's why we can't sit here today to say, here's what our water right need is. With specificity, all we can say is, this is a required process that we're going through, and we have experience that these springs will be the result. And as soon as we know about them, then we can start working on the specifics under this agreement.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any more questions? Director Camblin?
Could you explain to me the lease, the water lease from the Colorado so in other words, that lease, that water is required to have enough water, enough CFS to make the in-stream flow work? Is that what I'm getting?
Well, yeah, the Milk Creek #1 ditch is a water right owned by Colawio. And I think in part the consideration here was that CWCB is getting its in-stream flow in the rates that it requested. The only adjustment would be potentially the priority date of its enforcement if it is subordinated to a spring in exchange operated by Colawio. And so in consideration of really the priority date adjustment, Colawio would provide the Milk Creek #1 ditch priority, which has several priorities, but its most senior is very senior, to allow that water right to be in the in-stream flow in this intervening time as part of the consideration for the proposal. And I think what I'd like to emphasize too on that is maybe the bigger piece is the Milk Creek Reservoir construction. If the CWCB in-stream flow were senior to these rights that arose in Colawio's mine over the next 20 years. Colawio would be in a position where they would have to replace depletions upstream of the in-stream flow without this subordination. And in light of the existing storage and what's available to do that, Colawio would be forced to develop its Mill Creek Reservoir in order to store enough water in order to replace. And so the storing of that water would then have an even greater impact on the in-stream flow that's that we're trying to protect here. And so it's both the lease, but also it's avoiding this result of having to store tens of thousands of acre feet of water in order to replace those depletions, as opposed to just subordinate the depletions and avoid that storage development.
So back to that, sorry, can I keep going? Sorry, this is confusing a little bit, but will the in-stream flow have two separate water rights, or will it actually use the older water right of the leased water? I mean, so my concern is a rancher downstream or whatever, if it's called with the older water right, technically in my mind, the in-stream flow should have the 2026 water right. So how does that work?
You want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So under this proposal, the amount of the Mill Creek #1 ditch, if it was acquired by the CWCB, would be operating on their appropriation dates that Aaron mentioned that can be fairly senior in the basin. But it's not for the amount of water for the ditch and the in-stream flow are not directly connected. So the volumes are different. So the volumes of the in-stream flow are larger than they are for the ditch. And I believe the proposal that we put forward is that the ditch would be used to help preserve the in-stream flow water right moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Director Combs?
Yeah, Aaron, if I might ask you, what was when did Colawio get the #1 Mill Creek ditch? Did you develop and file for it? Did you purchase it from someone? What was the origin of this and the timing of?
Yeah, it was acquired. The ditch was acquired along with the acquisition of land, I think in 2014. And so that water right was part of a strategic acquisition, both of land and water. And then as soon as Colawio acquired it, they quantified it and changed it for mining and industrial purposes. And so those purposes will continue to exist. But as we move out of a mining phase and into a reclamation phase, it's anticipated that the need for that water right may be less, and that's part of what makes it available to lease to the CWCB for the in-stream flow here.
Okay. I appreciate all the work you guys have had to do. This kind of highlights some of the complexities of, it's not just as simple as put the filing and everything goes away. There's other consequences to consider. So I really appreciate all the work that you and Rob have put in on this, because this is not simple, this one especially. So thank you.
Yeah, not simple is a good summary. So thank you all for digging in to understand it.
Okay, are there any more questions?
If we could have just Roy Smith speak for 1 moment.
I'm Roy Smith from BLM. In support of this recommendation, I just want to underscore what a collaborative effort this whole thing is throughout this entire process. We started collecting data on Mill Creek 10 years ago, and we've been collaborating with multiple partners since then to bring this to you today for a final vote. It's really important to BLM because that collaboration shows that under the 3 species agreement, we can get flow protection done in difficult, hard places. And if there's ever a decision asked of the Fish and Wildlife Service about whether these species should be listed, one of the factors that will go into that decision is there protection in place on habitat, especially in places that are going to be hard to manage in the future. And I think we've accomplished that here. It underscores the BLM's collaborative relationship with CPW, where BLM's the land manager, the habitat manager, and CPW is the population manager. And we work together really closely on this stream because it's one of the major spawning tributaries for the 3 species in this part of the Yampa River. And I really want to thank Kalawao for stepping up and being part of that collaborative process. Throughout this time, Kalawao, and even before this, Kalawao has provided consistent access to CPW and BLM for accessing the creek. It's not easy to get there on BLM lands. It's much easier to drive through the mine property. And so we get access all the time for stocking, for fish shocking, for monitoring, and both CPW and BLM very, very much appreciate that ongoing collaborative relationship. And we also appreciate Colorado's commitment to meeting its statutory water quality requirements. I mean, we don't want that water in the creek either. So we really appreciate their effort to work this out with all the parties. And also to be willing to offer a valuable asset to help solve this problem. I mean, most of the water for the Milk Creek in-stream flow water right will come from the native flows of the creek, but that 600+ acre feet that's historically been diverted by the Milk Creek ditch during the irrigation season will just be that much more water, you know, on top of the naturally available water that will help us preserve the environment in this creek. And so it's a valuable asset, and it's a really big contribution to this collaborative process. And then finally, I just want to thank the CWCB staff and the AG's office staff. They have put a huge amount of effort into this appropriation. CWCB staff worked with BLM and CPW to do all the quantification work necessary to figure out what the flow rates are, made a very long-term effort, 8 years, to collect flow data on the creek so that we know what the flow regime looks like. And then in the end, just this huge push toward the finish line to develop a stipulation with Kalawao. So BLM is enormously appreciative of all the collaborative effort that went into this. And so I urge you to support the final outcome of a 10-year effort. Thank you.
Director Camplin.
So I just one more comment on this a little bit. I guess what my concern is Director Ullman and the CWCB staff has got to make sure that I see some problems with this as far as the Division 6 engineer and her staff, and along with some of the shareholders below this, knowing how that water is administrated. And I think you're just going to have to continue to educate these people of how this is going to work, because it's I know water fairly well and it confuses me a little bit. So just a heads up is, yeah, you're going to have to educate some people on this. So that's all I had.
Thank you. Director Vasquez.
I just want to compliment everyone involved. It shows we can do hard things, and with climate change and persistent drought, things are going to get harder and harder. So hats off to all of you.
Director Riss.
Yeah, in that same vein, I just want to recognize Rob and his team. They've had a lot going on. This board is well aware of that, and the following agenda item is one of those many things. So I just really want to thank you guys for your creativity and your persistence and willingness to find pathways. Thank you.
Get to use our creative part of our brains once in a while.
Director Nichols.
Yeah, I just want to echo the same thing from CPW's perspective. This creek is just critical for 3 species recovery efforts. And I just want to compliment Rob and his staff, BLM, and Colorado Wild, and just all the efforts that went in.
Thank you. Are there any more comments or questions? Okay, board, you have staff recommendation before you. What is your pleasure? Dr. Oz?
Yeah, I also would just echo the would like to commend all the parties. These are not easy issues, and so really appreciate everyone's willingness to be creative and innovative. So thank you. And I will move staff recommendation for item 21C.
Thank you. So motion made. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Director McLeod. Is there any discussion? Okay, motion made in second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to item 22, the in-stream flow acquisitions.
Good morning, Kaylee White, CWCB staff. I've got the last item of the day, and it's good news. So, I'm happy to present the good news. This is an informational item, item 22A. So I'm going to give you just a really quick overview of a 10-year history. And then Josh Boisivian, I know how to spell his name, but it's really hard to pronounce. But he's of the Colorado Water Trust, and he's going to come up and say a few words. He's been very key in this project, moving it forward through Water Court. And then Eric Pontiandi of Fort Collins is on a Zoom call. And then I believe Davis Wirt of Northern is also on the Zoom call. And the rest of our partners are probably listening in on YouTube. So this is the Poudre Flows Augmentation Plan. The project started in my world around 2015, maybe 2014. And I'm sure the locals were working on it far before that. Where the local water users requested assistance. They have water rates and they have dry up points in their river and the Cache la Poudre, and there was no legal mechanism to dedicate that water to that river. So our partners now are the cities of Fort Collins and Greeley and Thornton. Northern Water is a partner, Cache la Poudre Waters Users Association, and of course, Water Trust and CWCB. And we're all co-applicants on the Water Court case. So there was no existing in-stream flow through this reach from the canyon mouth of the Poudre all the way down to the South Platte River. There was multiple dry up points, no ready solution. So it was hard to see the pathway. It was really easy to see the rocks, but hard to see the path. So we had met, everyone agreed that in the statute, the word augmentation, CWCB could adjudicate an augmentation plan, but there was no sideboards on that. Well, what kind of an augmentation plan? Can we augment stream flow maybe? So it was decided before 2020 that the bill was actually presented and passed in 2020, which clarified CWCB's authority and how to adjudicate an augmentation plan to augment stream flow. And that's codified in 3792 102 4.5, made a new substatute, and 3792 3058, which is to add augmentation water later to such plan. So this plan is in Larimer and Weld counties, a 55-mile reach of stream. It goes all the way from the canyon to the confluence of the South Platte River. Now, this board approved the plan, the seed water rates to come into the plan, and the flow rates set in different segments of the stream in January of 2021. A water court application was filed that year, and it was just decreed last December in Division 1. So here's the map. Shows you from the canyon mouth down to the South Platte River through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 segments of stream. And then these are the flow rates that the board took. The CPW had studied each of these to see what the minimum necessary to preserve the natural environment and the higher flow rate to improve the natural environment. So because the plan is to augment the flow rates needed to preserve and improve the natural environment to a reasonable degree, the target flow rates were set as up to the total stream flow. So the acquired water rates, the seed water that's in the decree, and future water rates that can be brought to this plan
can be used and protected in the stream up to those flow rates. If the stream's flowing higher than that, then people can exchange on that extra water. In statute, though, all exchanges must be protected, all existing exchanges. So people can still operate the exchanges. This is just additional water that's being put in the river and set and held, hopefully all the way through the river down to wherever the water rates can travel to. So this shows the Fort Collins Seedwater Reach and the Greeley Seedwater Reach. So with that brief intro, I'm going to turn it over to Josh.
Thanks, Cami. Good morning. My name is Josh Boissevain, and I am a staff attorney for the Colorado Water Trust. We're a Colorado nonprofit focused on restoring water to rivers and streams and working squarely within the Colorado's market-based and prior appropriation system. We've been involved with the Poudre Flows program from its earliest stages when it was still a collaborative conversation among stakeholders brainstorming how to help the river. Just to give you an overview about what I'm going to talk about, I'll talk about why Poudre Flows is important. I'll talk about the water court case, and then I'll talk about what's next for this project. So as you may know, the Cashflow Poudre River is essential to the lives of more than 500,000 people along the Northern Front Range. And it's a river that's been heavily overappropriated since at least the late 1800s. Between the mouth of the Poudre Canyon and the confluence with the South Platte, diversions and exchanges for agricultural, municipal, and industrial uses are extensive enough that the river regularly dries up at multiple points. The simple idea behind Poudre Flows is to use a law-based, court-approved tool, a plan for augmentation, to allow water users to voluntarily contribute water that is already decreed for augmentation back to the Poudre where it can be protected in stream. The key benefit of this structure is that only added water is protected, which ensures that the project does not interfere with existing water users. So in effect, the augmentation supplies will float on the bottom of the river, protected from diversions, reconnecting dry up locations, and boosting flows without interfering with the hardworking nature of a river that so many people depend on. I won't speak on behalf of our partners on this, but I know that the Water Trust is really excited to see this project implemented so it can serve as a model for other similarly situated rivers around the state. It is a tool, first, it is a tool that is voluntary and locally managed. Second, it creates a strong buffer for protecting existing water users. And third, it is scalable, meaning that water can be added to this plan in the future. We believe that the idea of a stream flow augmentation could be a great tool for other hardworking rivers and streams around the state that maybe don't have in-stream flow reaches, but do have a lot of decreed augmentation water. So next, I want to briefly walk through the water court process for Poudre Flows. The application was filed in April of 2021 as case number 21 CW 3056, with 7 co-applicants representing a wide cross-section of water interests, from municipalities and local water users to the CWCB and the Water Trust. As you can see, there was also significant scrutiny in this case. 16 parties filed statements of opposition, including major municipal providers, irrigation companies, special districts, and the state and division engineer. In other words, the Poudre Flows project was closely examined by a wide range of interests that rely on or administer the river. The case was set for a 10-day trial in October of 2025, but ultimately we were able to resolve the opposers' concerns through settlement. We filed a final stipulation and a motion to vacate shortly before the trial date, and the Water Court entered a decree on December 5th, 2025, resulting in a fully adjudicated, durable framework for implementing the project. But just because the decree was entered last month doesn't mean the work is done. This is really just a transition from adjudication to implementation. In the short term, we're focused on getting the plan up and running. We're working towards a phase 3 memorandum of agreement in the spring of 2026. This will outline how the 7 partners will work together to manage Poudre Flows into the future. By April 1st, we're required to submit to DWR and the opposers in the case an annual preview of how we see the plan operating for the coming year. Based on where things stand today, we're optimistic that, subject to hydrology and operations, we could see water protected in sections of the river as early as this year. Looking longer term, there are a few key goals Poudre Flow's partners will be working towards. First, we'll focus on growing the plan by adding additional augmentation water over time as supplies and interest allow. Second, partners will continue the close coordination that made this project successful in water court to ensure that the plan remains effective and responsive as conditions change. And finally, and most importantly, we'll continue engaging with the broader Poudre water community so that this project remains collaborative, transparent, and grounded in local conditions well into the future. With that, I'll pass it back to Kaylee.
Thank you, Josh. So I'm not sure if Eric Batiandi, who's online, to say a few words with Fort Collins.
Yeah, this is Eric Batiandi with the City of Fort Collins. I'm in the City Attorney's Office. The nice thing about going after Josh is that I don't have much to add to that great presentation. Just on behalf of the City of Fort Collins, we wanted to express our gratitude towards the CWCB, its staff and board members, and our other partners for reaching this milestone in the project. And we look forward to moving towards implementation of the project and actually getting additional water in the river. We're available for any questions, but we appreciate all the CWCB support over these years and look forward to moving ahead. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Are there any questions?
I don't have any questions, but
Dr. Nguyen?
things take time. I'm thinking about where this idea first came up, and to the credit of Colorado State University, the Water Center, was 2012 when Colorado State University went on a limb, in my view, and put together a group called the Poudre Runs Through It Working Group. And it was roughly 15 or 18 individuals that were invited to that group to talk about the Poudre River, kind of in a risk-free environment. We were not seeing eye to eye on a lot of things around the Poudre at that point. And I applaud Reagan and Mary Lou Smith was facilitated a lot of those meetings early on. And I'm looking at the website, and I still participate in this group that meets monthly through the winter months, and it took us probably 2 years to come up with a moniker that's let's make the Poudre River the world's best example of a healthy working river. But from that group, after probably year 2, after thinking about kind of what kind of initiatives could bring us together, this was one of them. So from say 2013 to 2026, things take a time to bake, and it's just I applaud those who've worked so hard to make this happen. Probably the other initiative that PRTI, Poudre Runs Through It Working Group, is proud of is the Poudre Forum, which is an annual gathering of Poudre interests that occurs every year. Probably took a time out during COVID, but that gathering is on March 6th for anybody who's interested, and hopefully part of that day will be spent celebrating this achievement. It's really important to the Poudre. So a little history on where this idea came from. I also want to mention Dan Brown, an attorney out of Fort Collins, was involved over several years advancing it, as well as John Stokes, who served the city of Fort Collins so well for many years. TNC for many years as well, was kind of one of the original brainchild of this idea.
Thank you. Are there any more comments or questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next we have public comment, and we have 2 that have signed up. The first is Ken Brenner.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to address you, Board of Directors, staff. I am here to speak on about the Interbasin Compact Committee and the evolution that's taking place right now. And thank you for that support, because without your support, I'm afraid there'd be an entirely different conversation going on right now. When I first was appointed to become part of the Interbasin Compact Committee, one of the two representatives from the Yampa White Green, there was a fair bit of frustration, even skepticism about why there was even an Interbasin Compact Committee. But in fact, that's the only reason I got on, is one of our directors, one of our roundtable members was done. He just said, I'm not going to waste any more of my time. And we know that we have many valuable resources on these roundtables and with the IBCC, and they need that opportunity to express that voice. I think it was Sean, we all know Sean Cronin can be quite candid, said, look, we don't need to come here for a lecture. We're the smart people. We need to talk to each other. We need a chance to learn from each other. So there's been this really kind of a fortuitous transition going on with Lauren becoming our director, executive director, with Becky moving into her new position and also serving as chair for the IBCC, and for Kat Weissmiller and her staff being so accommodating and supportive of what we are trying to get done. And first thing we did was we stopped meeting for 2 hours and start meeting for a full day. We also set up a subcommittee system to try to continue some of the important work that was going on when we had finally identified some priorities. The first thing that we really identified was just that we came to agreement that a really important priority from the perspective of the IBCC was the snow measurement program. And we conveyed that to you, and you did something about it. You got us money in the projects bill. Thank you. That was a really encouraging that we could show that with our consensus, that we could, if we could build a consensus around a topic, that you could help us accomplish something. Well, it's gone further than that. Now we have identified this long list of topics that Becky reviewed with you yesterday. And we now have a lot of work cut out for us for the next few weeks. No, excuse me, next few years. And yeah, I wish it was just going to be a few weeks. But what I want to make sure that we appreciate is that the roundtables are really this unique entity of the grassroots voice and people that are really engaged in the issues surrounding water and anxious to try to learn more from you and from the staff, as well as a chance to tell you, express their ideas and their concerns. So this basically what we've done is we've set up this collaboration that's really perhaps exactly what was originally envisioned in House Bill 1177, was that the IBCC could facilitate this communication between the various basins. What's going on? It's actually really going on, and so the tackling storage, these are conversations that are tough, and yet I think that we're going to have a lot of success, and we're going to be bringing you some really, I think, interesting proposals for you to gnaw on and see just how you might be able to help us help facilitate accomplishing a lot of these goals. To that point, there's a synergy in efforts also with the Colorado Water Congress. When Shanae and her staff realized that what we were doing, it became pretty easy for her to say, you know what, the theme for the Congress, the Water Congress here starting tomorrow should dovetail that. And so that's what we've done, is talked about storage and preserving agriculture are the first two topics that we had identified. So collectively, I think we're going to be able to get a lot more done by working together. And again, thank you and your staff for that encouragement and that support. And I look forward to what we can accomplish working together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Mark Shea.
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you. My name is Mark Shea. I'm the Watershed Planning Supervisor with Colorado Springs Utilities, but I guess more relevant to the comments I have for you all today, I'm the immediate past chair of the Arkansas Basin Roundtable. and would like to share a few words of gratitude for Director Felt's service as a member of the Colorado Water Conservation Board on behalf of the roundtable, and really maybe even more importantly, in his role as liaison from this board and CWCB as a state agency to our roundtable and our membership. I joined the roundtable in 2016. In a short 2 years, I was asked to step up and serve as chair. Not knowing any better, I thought it would be easy and relatively straightforward. I spent 2019 basically rigging the boat for my tenure as chair, not knowing what was going to happen in 2020. And thankfully, early in 2020, at the input of Greg's time here with you all, he was appointed to serve as the Arkansas Basin Director with this board and represent our basin. As liaison, he has brought a critical lifeline for our basin and our membership to connect to what's happening at a state level and the discussions that you all are having, the decisions that you all are making. And the manner in which Greg has done that over the years during my time as chair has been incredibly helpful for me and for our roundtable in general. He always had a very succinct and complete report out of your all's business, provided it always in a very optimistic and professional way. I think he did a very good job based on his compassionate interest and genuine sincerity and I would say extreme intellectual curiosity about what was going on in our basin, the different members of our water community, in kind of bringing that to you all for your all's consideration in the work that you do. I recently just finished my tenure in that respect, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to do a lot of good work with Greg. He's a very important part of our basin, our roundtable, and a cherished member, obviously, of the Colorado water community. So Greg, on behalf of the Arkansas Basin Roundtable, and really the water community of Southeastern Colorado, just thank you for your time and service. Appreciate it.
Are you going to make a poster of this that he can hang on his wall?
Yeah, thanks to Stephen Reeves in our watershed protection section for jumping on the AI real quick, and a reminder that there's more people in this room listening to our conversations online. So thanks to Stephen for putting that together. And Greg, we can frame that for you if you would like to hang in your office.
Okay, so with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Director Felt. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director McLeod. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We are now adjourned at 11:52 a.m.